in?
Yes,
So-
ma'am.
Okay. Everybody stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome all the citizens that are around, that are here, and also all the staff. So are there any citizens that might have some questions or something to address the podium?
And there's a few residents tuning in through Zoom. And
Okay.
so there also an opportunity is for them to provide comment via Zoom. And so we ask those individuals to virtually raise their hand through Zoom if they're interested in speaking. And James will track if anybody actually does that. No? It doesn't appear so, ma'am. And so
Okay.
we can continue.
Okay, next we'll have items from council. Anybody wish to speak to a subject? Okay. Okay, I guess we will go to, ooh, I don't have my stuff here. Where's my mouse?
Work session.
Probably straight down to work session.
Okay, well, we'll go to work sessions because my mouse is not here and I'm not going up.
James took your mouse?
Yeah, the mouse isn't here.
Oh, he has it on the keypad.
Oh, okay, so I don't have a mouse, but.
It's
we'll-
okay.
You just scroll on this thing.
Okay. There you go.
Okay. So are we ready?
Yes, we're ready.
Okay, well, welcome to this year's installment of Budget Workshops. It's obviously been a different budget process for us, but I do want to start off by thanking Gilbert and his team for stepping up to the plate and really pushing through to develop the preliminary budget that we will discuss this week. Regardless of COVID, regardless of people having to work from home, I mean, his staff really stepped it up. More so this year as we changed the process. You know, we've had conversations about proactively providing opportunities for you. What is that playback from, Jay?
What is that playback from?
The Zoom meeting.
Yeah,
from
it's
Zoom.
right here on this.
We're good? Okay. And so there was a lot of work that went into this year's budget process. And so again, I just want to thank Gilbert and the finance team, Laura, Wesley, Billy. I mean, literally everybody in that team, they did a really good job. And so thank you all for that. In front of you, hopefully you have your portfolio, if you will, that has a copy of all the presentations. This is the order of the presentations that we will follow. And as far as I know, it's the exact same presentations that we will go through this week that are in there that we printed for you last week. And so I want to briefly start off talking a little bit about the schedule, because in the preliminary schedule that we put out, we spread out all the different departments over 3 days. But I did want to communicate that, as has been the goal in previous years, our goal is to actually go through them all in 2 days. And so the goal for today is to get through the departments that are scheduled originally for today, which will include, of course, a holistic overall overview of the budget, the general fund, which will include administrative departments, the public safety departments, police, fire, municipal court, development services. But I also hope to go into talking about the library and the parks department, which would wrap up many of our departments and of about half of them. And so if we are able to get through Parks Department, that would only leave talking about Motel Tax Fund, CBB, Main Street, Environmental Services, Public Works, and some of our smaller departments and internal service departments for tomorrow. And so I feel fairly confident that we'll be able to knock that schedule out. Before I proceed, though, I just want to double check if everybody has what they need for the discussion. Okay, did the mayor hop on? No? Okay. So I'm going to kick it off then and talk about overall budget. Let's see. Are you clicking or am I clicking?
I have a technical question.
Yes, ma'am.
Because this meeting is Zoomed also, should our screens be on a Zoom screen so that we can see, for instance, if the mayor calls in? Or
No,
are we not gonna see that?
Zoom details are only in the screen that James has over here.
So we can use our screens.
And the camera right here
Okay,
is the one that is being projected on the broadcast for Zoom. So the public and the mayor, once they tune in, they'll see this view and the presentations.
Currently, right now, all they're seeing is just.
Yeah,
okay, thank
So-
you.
you're welcome. Okay. All right. So first off, I want to spend a minute talking about goals and objectives going into fiscal year 21. Some of this didn't occur the way that we would have liked because of COVID. But regardless, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that our budget and everything that we do is tied to our overall mission, which is to enhance livability. And it's probably not something that we talk about enough, but I think it's a very, very important part of what we do to be able to connect the dots between what all of our departments do and the way that in which they enhance livability. One of the things that we wanted to do more intentionally this year was to incorporate city council feedback earlier in the process. You may recall that we had a workshop scheduled for the end of March that we had to postpone due to COVID. Our intent was at that workshop to go through an exercise with you talking about Plan 2035 to help outline some priorities and have a conversation about overall budget priorities. But of course, we couldn't have that meeting. Regardless, though, I've had conversations with all of you in general about your priorities as council members or as the mayor. And so I've tried to do what we can to incorporate just what I've learned from my conversations with all of you in the budget, because it is important that the budget document reflects what your priorities are as elected officials and the things that matter to you, as well as the things that matter to us, and ultimately the things that matter to the public as well. And so we try and put our feelers out as much as we can and try and capture those elements in the budget. I already hit on Victoria 2035. You're familiar with that. We had our workshop in December that was very specific on Victoria 2035 that, in essence, council reaffirmed all the goals and objectives listed in that plan. And so we continue to push forward on that end. Of course, with everything that's going on with COVID, a big priority is for us to continue being financially responsible in the way that we put our budget together. As you all know, we are legally required to put together a balanced budget. And so this budget achieves that. There's feedback coming back over here, James, again,
Again from this.
over there somewhere. We also want to start thinking a little bit about our long-term financial planning. You've heard some of us speak, especially Gilbert. I'm going to stop for a second.
It's coming from there. I don't know,
Yeah, it
turning
is.
off that
Is there any way
microphone.
to turn it off or lower the volume on it?
I don't even know what you're pointing at.
She's pointing to the phone, and so basically it's coming through the phone.
Yeah, it's coming through here.
Oh, okay.
And if I turn it off, then there's no audio.
How is it getting the replay?
Going to be located,
How's it getting the replay?
Nice.
where's the speaker that it's
I'll be here all
responding
night.
to?
Yeah, that's right.
Really, I will
That's
be.
right. That's right. That's funny.
Where's that it's shooting at it?
Oh, yeah, maybe that's the
Yeah.
speaker.
Or that could do it. Can you turn that one off? Yeah,
Had some
you got the power.
noon
That
today,
was the
but
speakers,
office
yeah.
Yeah.
surgery back.
Coming in.
Okay, did the mayor, if the mayor comes on, he'll be able to hear or no?
Currently, right now, it's not, so I'm gonna turn it back on to unmute it, to see if we're getting the feedback now.
Okay. Well, I'll keep going, and I apologize for those technical difficulties.
That's better.
No playback. See,
No
I think we're
playback.
doing
See,
better
it
already.
stopped.
We fixed it.
All right. All right.
The joke would have gotten old.
I was mentioning that one of the topics that has come up through Gilbert is this conversation about debt capacity that will be coming in the future years. And so there's a couple of elements in this year's budget that already help set the groundwork for that discussion. So we want to be conscious of that. Of course, our employees are important to us as well. One of the things that we haven't necessarily talked too much publicly with you about, but internally we went through an exercise of doing an employee survey last year And there's a lot of elements in that survey that we're trying to improve through technology to really be more responsive and be more 21st century, which at the end of the day is not only what all of us would like, but also what our employees would like us to become. There's a lot of processes internally that could be a little more modern, and our employees desire that type of modernization. And so there's a lot of investment in this proposed budget to continue becoming more 21st century. Okay. This is a lot of numbers, so I won't necessarily go through line item by line item, but the big takeaway here is the number at the very bottom, which is the total budget, because we'll take a deep dive into, of course, all of the different areas further along. But to start off, the proposed budget for fiscal year 21 is 129.2 million versus the current fiscal year that we're in is about 138. And so you'll notice right off the bat that the variance between our budget for fiscal year 21 versus fiscal year 20 is close to $9 million. And that's due, of course, to a variety of different reasons, which we will get into shortly. On the general fund alone, and I've got a few slides later on specific on the general fund, but a few things to note. You may recall that we had a conversation about our CIP and having a decrease in the capital construction fund transfer, and so that's accounted for in here. There's, of course, a few other elements that we've utilized to be creative with this next year's budget, such as moving community appearance over to environmental services fund. We're also actually proposing that VSTDC fund the transit system program as opposed to that coming out of the general fund. I already talked about the CIP. You may recall that during this fiscal year, we actually were able to take care of the TxDOT bonds, which was for the Loop project. And so we got that off the books. The utility fund also sees an increase. And I won't go through each one of these as the different departments will tackle some of these items. But all in all, there's a lot of one-time expenditures that took place in fiscal year 20 that are not taking place to the same extent in fiscal year 21 because we want to keep as much cash as possible on hand since there's a lot of unknowns associated with COVID. And as always is the case, we want to be very conservative with the approach that we take. And so that's part of the reasoning for that. One of the things that'll be a common theme throughout all the budgets of all the departments is associated with the benefits cost. And so you may recall a conversation about the insurance fund where we discussed the city increasing its contribution. And so every department will see an increase through the personnel account or line items because of the increase in health premiums. And so that's pointed out there. We also have additional positions that I'll get to at a later slide. But those additional positions are also accounted for in the budget, which of course are the 4 police officers that we received through the COPS grant program and the grant administrator position that we added recently because of being able to get reimbursed for some of those expenditures through the COVID grant program. If we look at just the revenue alone, you may recall that it's not unusual for us to have an expenditure budget that's larger than our revenue budget because of us tapping into some of the capital funds that we have for some of the one-time projects that we set money aside for. And so if we were to just look at the revenue side alone, though, you'll notice that there's still also a variance of close to $9 million on the revenue side. And that's because of a lot of reasons. Our budget is obviously a very complex document because of all the transfers that take place. And so many of these transfers are accounted for as revenue for some of these funds. And so, for example, the fact that the Capital Construction Fund is seeing a decrease of $5.7 million, that's because the money that's being transferred into that fund is not to the same degree because we did not add any capital projects in fiscal year 21. The more important number to probably focus on is specific to the general fund, which you'll notice that we expect a variance of about 1.2 million in the revenue budget for the general fund, since that's where we get the majority of our administrative departments, public safety, et cetera. And we'll go more specific into that here in a second.
Mr. Garza,
Yes, ma'am.
when you reference capital construction fund, is that what we routinely reference as capital improvements, projects, or is that related?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
So specifically on the general fund, no surprise here. We've been talking about for months about seeing a decrease in sales tax. And even though the sales tax for this fiscal year appears to be coming in better than what we anticipated, there's still a lot of unknowns related to the future. There's also, of course, the decrease in the cost of oil and gas. And so there's so many elements that are contributing to some form of potential instability in the future. And so because of that, we've taken a conservative approach and have budgeted a decrease in sales tax to the tune of about $1.7 million for next year. We are, however, adjusting or have included in the budget an increase in close to $600,000 in additional revenue coming in through property tax. And that assumes a couple of elements. And there's a few slides down the line that specifically talk about our land values and the property tax rate that we'll get to a little later. This construction fund is what we already talked about, which you're familiar with, which is associated with doing less CIP projects. General fund, as I mentioned before, is the one of highest interest to us because this is where property taxes and sales tax go into, and this is where we pay for administrative services and police and fire. And so you notice right off the bat a couple of things. So one, the general fund expenditure budget is also going down by itself. And so you notice that it's going down to the tune of about $4.4 million from $54 million to $49 million, or close to $50 million. And you'll notice that a big part of that is related to transfers and capital outlay. And a lot of those elements are associated with what I mentioned already, which is a decrease in one-time expenditures and a decrease in us transferring money out for capital projects due to our decision to postpone a CIP conversation for a year. A couple of things to note, however, are of course some of the impacts to some of the percentages that I think tells a story of what COVID has done to our budget. And so in fiscal year 20, for example, you'll notice that our personnel and benefits expense accounted for roughly 62%. And that jumped up to 67%. And that's percentage-wise, that's a pretty substantial percentage difference. But the reason for that, if we think of the big picture of the budget is, we took out a bunch of one-time projects. And so when you take out the one-time projects, the representative proportional piece of personnel goes up. And so proportionally, it looks like we're spending more money next year on our personnel because we are, but it's because of the reallocation of funds, not because, we're adding, 25 positions to the budget or doing anything to that extent. It's simply the shifting around of the funds. I already talked about the increase in healthcare premiums that you'll see all across the board. One of the things that we're doing next year as a way to try and be more efficient and innovative is that we're taking all of our expenditures associated with building and custodial services and moving them into a specific fund. And so historically, all the different departments had their own specific budget line items associated with building maintenance. And what we were seeing was, different departments or different buildings had different contracts with different custodial service companies. We're literally maybe buying toilet paper from different companies. And so what we want to do is take more of a centralized approach to that, which now we can do since last year we actually created a building and equipment services department and actually take all those funds and lump them into one fund so that can be centralized and overseen by one entity and one individual, so that hopefully through economies of scale and just looking at things a little different, we can realize some savings. And so, for example, rather than having 4 or 5 different custodial agencies cleaning city buildings on top of our internal folks, why not look at bidding out all city facilities and seeing if there are any cost savings if we have one company do that as opposed to 5 or 6. And so those are the types of things that creating this fund will help us achieve. And of course, it's consistent with our move to try and be more data-driven and be more innovative and more efficient as much as possible. I already hit on the following points, so I won't repeat myself, associated with community appearance and the additional positions that we're adding. We did increase slightly the maintenance expenditures associated with the street maintenance program, and there's a few slides later that have the breakdown about where that money goes. Again, consistent theme, a lot of decreases due to the decrease in capital outlay. On the expenditure side, you'll obviously see a consistent expenditure reduction, since obviously we try and keep a balanced budget as much as possible. And so you'll see that the total budget there on the expenditure side has also decreased. And you'll notice that on the public works services part, you'll see that decrease for 2.2. And I assume that's also associated due to the capital projects and decreasing some of those one-time public works associated projects. You'll notice community appearance is blanked out for fiscal year 21, and that's because we're proposing moving community appearance from general fund to environmental services fund, and so that's why you see that as a dash. And on the building and custodial services side, we're transferring that out to create a separate fund, as was just mentioned a minute ago. On the revenue side, we already hit on looking at potentially reduction in sales tax revenue for 1.7, seeing an increase in property tax revenue to the tune of about $600,000. But you'll also notice municipal court fees down below and the hit that we foresee taking, which is also associated to COVID. I already hit on those items. Every year, finance puts together this type of graphic just to try and represent how much of this money in the general fund goes to what. And so you'll notice there that public safety services consumes about 29.5 million out of the 41 million within the general fund. And public safety for us, the way it's categorized here, not only includes police and fire, but also includes municipal court. And so you'll notice that they take a big chunk of our budget. And I forget what that percentage was for just police and fire. I don't know if you remember, Gilbert. Okay. For myself, I'm accustomed to looking at police and fire kind of alone without municipal court. And so we had asked staff to put that number together. And you're right, it was roughly around 55% of our general fund goes towards police and fire. To hit a little bit on the property taxes coming up, I wanted to kick off by showing you this graph that illustrates the volatility of sales tax and the reliability of property tax. And so you'll notice that through the years, the sales tax is all over the place, and the property tax is fairly consistent on the rise. And this is important because as we talk about trying to be more financially sustainable, as Kevin talked about recently during his presentation, it's important that we be conscious and be intentional with how we approach the business side of the city and our finances. And so for us, the breakdown was about a third property tax and about a third sales tax. And so they both, for the most part, have an equal share of the revenue that they bring into the general fund, but they don't both share equally that dependability and that reliability. And so that's something that we need to keep in mind as we have conversations about trying to be more long-term financially sustainable. As it relates to the tax rate, let me actually go to this slide because I think this will help better paint the picture. And so one of the things that I think we can help educate council and the public on is the relationship between our taxable appraised value and the tax rate, right? It's no secret that the appraised value has a direct impact on the tax rate that not only we assess, but that the school district assesses, the county, and all of the different taxing entities. And so you'll notice in this bar graph, the fluctuation of the net. And we say the net because there's always increases and decreases in various categories, which we have some tables for those as well. And so at the end of the day, what we care about is the net. And so you'll notice that from 18 to 19, while it from a money figure standpoint wasn't a huge increase, but on the bar you could see it, right? And so you could see how we went from 3.5 billion to 3.69 billion in assessed value. And you may recall last year when we proposed the budget for 20 that we actually were able to increase our property tax revenue by 5% and keep the tax rate under the effective. And I'll go back to that slide to show you that. But you'll notice that the same does not apply to go between 2019 and 2020, which is why when we talk about the property tax rate this year, we're looking at potentially making some changes. This illustrates it a little bit better. And so you see that between 19 and 20, it went from 62.24 to 61.15. So it actually dropped the rate, but at the same time, we were able to get 5% additional revenue from property taxes because of that big jump in net assessed value between 18 and 19. Because that jump isn't the same between 19 and 20, the budget has been built on attaining an additional 3.5% in property tax revenue, which is the SB2 limitation. But because that assessed value has remained somewhat flat, it would suggest a slight change in the tax rate. Now, this is very preliminary. Keep in mind that the certified tax rolls don't come in till the end of July. And so once it gets time for us to formally talk to you about the tax rate and formally present the budget through the the legal budget hearings that we'll have in August, we'll have this more fleshed out. But it's important that you all kind of see the relationship that the net taxable appraised value is having on our tax rate, so that there aren't any surprises to anybody about what that looks like potentially at the end of this process. One of the things to note, though, as a side note, is catching trends. And so you'll notice that between 2015 and 2020 has remained somewhat flat. And so that goes back to the conversation that Kevin has started with his fiscal analysis, that we need to be conscious about looking at our appraised value, because at the end of the day, we all want that property tax rate to go down, but it would be very difficult for that tax rate to go down if this continues to stay flat. And so those are things that we need to see. And that's why it's important, I should say, for us to look at how we can increase the net taxable appraised value so that we can actually lower the property tax rate or keep it the same, but be able to get more money to do the things that we need to do. I mentioned a little bit about categories. And so, for example, this slide shows, and this, by the way, is only through 2019. Because we haven't received the certified tax rolls, we don't have bar graphs here to represent what the final 20 figure would look like. So it'll be interesting to see if these trends continue in 20. But you'll notice here that the value in residential is going up slowly, but at least it's going up. And so at minimum, it's trending in a direction that we want it to follow. However, the opposite is true with the commercial and industrial. You'll notice that the value there is trending downward. And so that's not good. And so we need to make sure that we continue to have conversations about economic development so that we can do what we can to ensure that the value of commercial and industrial property actually trends up and not down. Some of the other categories, include land, agriculture, exempt property. You'll notice at 19 there's a bar graph there that kind of jumps up for 19. I don't know if we ever got an answer, Gilbert, on the reasoning for that. On exempt property, on why 19 just jumped up significantly.
That's what, if I recall correctly, that's the property the church sold that property to college, the mall section. It was
Okay.
It was not exempt, it also became
Exempt. Okay. And I know that we've also added, property off of Placido Benavides that'll probably be exempt. And so that all goes into this. You'll notice special inventory kind of goes all over the place. Development inventory is also trending downward, and so that's also something that we need to keep an eye on. So just to kind of remind everyone, we do have the requirement of 25% expenditure reserve fund. We typically exceed that 25%, and that helps us, during times like COVID or other times that we need to tap into our expenditures to not come close to that 25%. I mentioned earlier about the balanced budget approach, and so here we're showcasing how our revenues and expenditures are fairly consistent with being balanced for the most part. Before I move on to high-level summary of the health plan, any questions on that high level on general fund? James, did the mayor ever hop on? Okay. Can you reach out to him, see if he needs help getting on? Okay. On the health plan side, I'm going to fly through this. There's actually a part on the agenda where Gilbert will go in more detail with the health plan tomorrow. I simply want to hit on what we've talked about before, which is the fact that we're looking at increasing the city's health premiums. And so you'll notice there that the difference between fiscal years 20 and 21 budget associated with the health fund and the city's health premiums part of it has gone up for roughly $1 million. And keep in mind that our strategy is to try and do that ideally from the recurring side, so that we're not simply relying on one-time funds to achieve that, so that it's something that we're just financially stable for every year. I'm not going to go through this, Gilbert, so you can kind of go through that tomorrow for the most part. High level here, reserves are trending downward. You all know that, which is why we need to shore up our health insurance fund. So a couple of the big budget highlights. One of the things that we want to kind of summarize is just budget highlights, right? We want to make sure that we can be succinct with the way that we talk about what's included in next year's budget, not only to help us draft documents that we can put out to the public, but even, for instance, once we get to August and have formal budget hearings, it's typically appropriate for myself to provide a brief overview of the budget in case there are people that come to those budget workshops or hearings to hear some of these budget highlights. And so we really wanted to kind of summarize some of these things. Y'all, I fell into my own trap. Yeah, I tell staff all the time never to refer to y'all as y'all, and I just did it. So in any case, so as you may remember, when Ashley gave her presentation last month or a couple of months ago, there's a great emphasis, a larger emphasis being placed on our communications department and our communication strategies. That'll become apparent when I go through the communications budget. You may recall as well that we started a compensation and classification study that we're also undertaking. And so our goal is that that gets finalized soon so that we can actually start conversations in fiscal year 21 about what that looks like moving forward. We've already talked about health insurance. You're familiar with the fact that we have a new healthcare consultant on board. And so that may result in changes that will be talked about tomorrow a little bit. We have a bunch of master plans out there. Some of these we're already in the process of bringing to you for selection or award, I should say. And some of them are out currently for RFQ proposal requests, if you will. You're familiar with some of these: downtown master plan, parks master plan, drainage master plan. We want to look at our codes to make sure that they're actually representative of producing a product that'll generate revenue for us. The thoroughfare master plan, that's in the process. We also want to look at our city facilities because we recognize we have some deferred maintenance issues with our facilities. And so it's important that we know what those are and what those challenges are. And of course, you're very familiar with the street assessment study, as that's a high priority item. Currently, that item is scheduled to be presented to you at the first meeting in August. That consultant has been working with our team practically since January on trying to get that finalized. COVID kind of slowed them down a little bit as well. But that street assessment study report will be presented at the first meeting in August. Already talked about shifting over community appearance and the creation of building and custodial services department into its own fund. We want to, regardless of us taking a break, or putting a pause on adding new CIP projects, we're also very cognizant of the fact that there are things that are already on the way, and that street maintenance is not something that we should necessarily stop. And so the budget still accounts for some funds associated with seal coat programs, the crack seal program, striping programs, sweeping programs, which that actually came to council a couple of meetings ago. And so we're still continuing to do the street maintenance aspect of it. And as you can see by some of the other projects that are listed down below, there's a lot of projects that are still ongoing, regardless of us adding new ones in fiscal year 21. And so we want to make sure that those get completed and we see those through. On the utility side, obviously, you are also familiar with the fact that our utility fund is in better shape than our general fund. And so on the utility side, there are some projects there that will continue. And I'm sure Ken will talk about those when he presents. On the park side, there are also some projects that I'm sure Jason will talk about. And everything else I think is hit on by different departments. I already hit on that. On those 2 points, that our FTE count is going up by 5 because of the 4 officers we're adding in the grant administrator position. With that, that's what I have for the overview part of it. Happy to answer any questions you might have on the overview piece.
Explain FTE.
Full-time equivalent. So that's what we call a full-time employee. Bless you. I was going to say for the enchiladas, but, you know.
Could be 2 part-time or.
I'm sorry?
It's 2 part-time employees is also 1 full-time employee, correct?
No, because FTEs associate insurance costs, retirement costs, and 2 part-timers would not.
Okay,
So an FTE is definitely value-wise greater than 2 part-timers.
okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep going. I promise it's not just me the whole day. I don't know how to take that, sir. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the smaller administrative departments and kind of lump all those together in one presentation. Those will include the city manager's office, the finance department, legal, city secretary, and human resources. Typically, communication and public affairs would be different, but because Ashley's not, she's still out on personal leave, she gave her presentation to you on her goals for her department a couple of months ago. And so I'm going to just quickly run through some of the financial changes in her area as part of this administration presentation. So as it relates to some of the goals and objectives, again, we want to be very intentional with what we're doing in the budget so that things are hopefully aligned with our 2035 comp plan or just aligned with some of the other goals that we have. You might have had noticed in the preliminary budget that we created maybe more robust departmental profiles than maybe what you had been used to seeing to serve as an introductory piece to the financial portion of each department. And so the intent there was to provide you with, an organizational chart of the department, various performance metrics, if applicable, or even just some of the goals and objectives that the department might have. In this particular case, from the administrative side, of course, a lot of our goals and objectives are associated with being financially sound and associated with offering amazing administrative support to you as the city council. We obviously strive to do that. And from an HR standpoint, we want to make sure that HR continues this value of being an employer of choice while enhancing some of that leadership development aspect of what they have to offer. Some of the survey results that we received from our employees do lead us to believe that they would like access to more professional development. And so we want to make sure that we're doing that as much as possible. So on the city manager's side, that looks like a large difference between fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 20. And no, I'm not adding another assistant city manager. But we are reorganizing the organization to shift over Gilbert's position from finance over to the city manager's office and change his title to chief financial officer. There's probably a list of items that we all can disagree on, but I think we can all agree that Gilbert to our organization is much more than simply a director and more than simply a department head. I mean, he truly is part of our executive leadership team. And so we felt it was appropriate to have an organizational structure that truly valued the role that he plays within our organization. And so by simply moving his position from the finance department to the city manager's office, changing his title to chief financial officer, we are officially making him part of the executive leadership team. He will officially office out of the city manager's suite. This not only will help with what we hope to accomplish with different reorgs, but quite frankly, it'll help myself, Mike, and Derek that are new-ish to the organization, and we want to make sure that we have Gilbert accessible so that we can learn from him as much as we can. He obviously has a lot of knowledge about the organization, not only from a financial standpoint, but he knows where all the skeletons are too. And so, that's very important to have right down the hall. And so we're simply shifting that position away from finance into the city manager's office. I want to make that very clear. We're not adding a position. It's simply a shift to that. You'll notice specifically in the city manager's office, a couple of other changes. You'll notice a decrease in capital outlay. There was some capital outlay in fiscal year 20 associated with the remodel of the city manager's suite to help accommodate some of our restructures. You'll also notice some other charges there that went up by $13,000. And this slide kind of shows what those are for, which is the creation of a council educational development fund of sorts, or just allocating more funds, I should say, for mayor and council to be able to participate in training and travel opportunities. So historically speaking, anytime a council member would want to go to a conference or go to some sort of training, that money would come from just the city manager's office budget for training and travel. And, we have a new mayor, new council member, and of course, we're also pushing all of you to go to different trainings. And so we wanted to make sure that there was money in the budget specifically set aside to help support your professional development efforts on top of ours. And so that's the reason for that change. One of the things you'll notice too that's consistent across the board with all the different departments is an increase to an interdepartmental charge associated with IT. And I'm sure a lot of the different departments and James will hit on that. But you'll notice that consistently across the board. And so we'll hit on those when those come up. But other than that, everything was pretty straightforward. I mentioned that you'll also notice increases due to health insurance premiums and an increase to the employer's portion of that. And so that's what you see here on one-time expenditures for that. Any questions on the city manager's office budget before I move to finance? No? Okay. So on the finance side, you'll see the opposite of what you just saw in the city manager's office. So you'll actually see an overall decrease in the budget for finance because of shifting away the finance director position and shifting it over to the city manager's office. You'll notice, of course, some minor changes that we typically kind of are routine. We have different leases or maintenance expenditures that go up. And so a lot of those, or trends, we might see certain trends of expenditures on office and supplies go down or go up, so we try and track those every year. Those are typically very minimal, a few hundred dollars here and there. But of course, the big ones here are what I just mentioned, the shifting of the position over to city manager's office. And as I mentioned earlier, every department's going to see that increase in interdepartmental for IT charges. And the one-time expenditure associated with that health insurance premium that we've been talking about. Now, I probably should have said earlier that the $1 million that we're trying to pump into the health fund is actually split recurring and one time. 400. So it's not split down the middle. So 400,000. Let's easy math. Let's round up. So yeah. So anyway, long story short, the point is that from that $1 million that we're trying to get more into the health fund, not all of it could come out of the recurring budget side. And so that's why you see some slides that show one time, because roughly $400,000 plus of that 1 million is coming from a one-time side. Our goal is that for fiscal year 22, all of that shifts over to the recurring side so that we don't rely on one-time expenditures every year to make that fund whole. Any questions on finance? Okay, so we'll move to legal. Legal is pretty straightforward. They'll see a small increase in 11,000. Literally, it's because of those two items that you'll see consistent across the board for the most part, which is the health premiums increase and the IT charges increase. And I don't know if now or later is appropriate time to hit on the specifics of the IT charges. Are we planning on talking about that tomorrow? Okay. So that is legal. That's the quickest department. Any questions on that front? Okay. Even the city secretary's office is seeing a greater variance than the legal department, and that's predominantly because of the election that is scheduled to take place in May of 21. And so you'll notice the increase in contractual services of close to $60,000. Yes, sir.
If the election was held when there was a general election, would we still be charged $50,000?
The election costs are split between the entities that are involved in that election. So since we are under the uniform election date in May, typically we see splits between us and VISD.
Right.
So if we went to a general election, a uniform election date in November, it could potentially be less. And that, it's not $50,000, it's actually around $30,000, but we have to budget for a runoff. So that's why we have to double it.
Thank you. You're going to get tired of hearing that health fund and the increase in the IT departmental charges. Any questions on the city secretary's budget? Okay. So on the HR side, you'll notice fairly flat, no major changes to HR's budget. There's actually a decrease there on the maintenance side. Later, when we talk about IT projects, you'll hear some more explanation on some of the shift associated with the online application system and HRS system that HR is looking at, which is a reason for the decrease on that maintenance side. But you'll notice the variance associated with health premiums. You'll notice the decrease associated to help fund the salary survey. That money is not being expended next year. That's why you see that as a decrease. You'll see some funds there associated with our goal to offer more opportunities for training and professional development. And so we've have in the budget some funds to assist our HR director to participate and go through the Certified Public Manager program. That's consistent with her overall career goals, and so we want to make sure we support her goals in going through that program. I myself am a credentialed manager through the CPM program and can attest that it's a really good program that helps prepare folks as much as possible to become city managers one day. And so it's a really good program that exposes participants through all facets of running a city. And it can be very easy for folks that, maybe are the public works route or the HR route or the finance route to not get exposed to some of the other areas to the same extent. And so it's a really good program. And so we're supporting her efforts in that. Again, you'll notice the increase in the IT charges. The one-times associated with that Certified Public Manager program and the portion that's associated with the health premium increases as one time. Any questions on HR? Communications will see the largest increase probably if not the largest increase for a department, one of the largest increases. This is consistent with the presentation that I actually gave a couple of months ago, where we talked about investing more money in some technologies to help with social media and getting some of the information out. You notice that the biggest difference, though, is associated on the personnel and benefits side. And this is really because we added or shifted positions to add more staff to her team. And so you may recall that historically speaking, the communications department also oversaw the print shop. And so we, as part of the reorg that we did last year, we actually moved the print shop away from communications, put it under purchasing. And one of the positions that was part of the print shop, we kept with communications. And so that wasn't adding a position to the communications department per se, but when we pulled away the print shop, we kept somebody back. And so now we're actually structuring that accordingly in the budget to account for more of a specific presence within the communications department. We also had a part-time position within the communications department that we actually upgraded to a full-time position in the middle of the year. We did that because of an opportunity that existed within the engineering department, and Ken might reference it too. But we're always looking for opportunities to be more efficient, opportunities to shift resources around. And there was a specific position, FTE-wise, going back to your term about FTE. I'm very conscious about honoring the FTE approval number that goes through the budget process, right? I don't think it's appropriate, for me to, start going crazy, adding a bunch of different positions without getting approval on that FTE count from council, or at least getting some input from council on being okay with that, similar to the anomaly of adding the grant administrator, where I felt it was important to ensure that there was buy-in for that. And so, long story short, there was an FTE position within engineering that they determined did not need to be filled. And so what we did was we upgraded that part-time position in communications to become an FTE, and in essence moved an FTE from engineering to communications in order to have another full-time position under communications. And so now the budget for next year accounts for those changes, and that's why you see the variance there of $134,000 for the additional two positions that stayed there. You'll notice on the maintenance side, a pretty significant increase, though, associated with software. And so Constant Contact, for instance, is a little bit pricier than what we're doing now. Currently, hopefully you receive the newsletter that goes out every Monday. Currently, we don't use Constant Contact. We use a separate software, which has limitations, not only in number of subscribers, but even in some of the fanciness of it, if you will. And so with Constant Contact, which is a better product, slightly more costly, we'll be able to add a ton more subscribers to the newsletter setup. And so we want to make sure that we're reaching as many people as possible. Perfect example, we have thousands of emails from people that have registered a water account with us, and we have a goal of pushing the newsletter or giving those folks an opportunity to subscribe to the newsletter. But we currently cannot do that, because if we actually had, all 7,000 or whatever it is emails that we have associated with a utility account, our current setup wouldn't be able to hold that. And so we want to upgrade. I'm rambling now, but we want to upgrade that. Sprout social licenses. One of the things that is important for us to note is that we're trying to centralize our social media exposure. You might recall her talking about taking a more centralized approach to managing social media. You may or may not be familiar with the fact that we have to archive a lot of these elements that go on social media. And so we need the software to help us not only manage social media posts, but also archive them. And so we need better software to help us do that. And you heard also Ashley in her presentation talk about wanting to do better in short form videos. You saw her give examples of how we kind of almost used this like longer video approach, and we had a bunch of videos that were 30 minutes and things of that sort, but she's really transitioning to shorter videos, and we could use better software to help accomplish that as well. So that's in the budget. And there's some other elements there under the contractual services that's also proposed to go up by $30,000. That is actually associated with even what we do with council, which is that Swag It feature. We want to keep and enhance what we offer in terms of our ability to transmit our council meetings on Facebook. There's an element to that software that actually allows us to, what's it called? Closed caption our meetings. And so we can actually improve upon some of those elements with some enhanced softwares. There's a lot of talk out there within the legislature about, as communities become more, I guess, technologically advanced with the way that they put out information, there's a lot of talk about, well, what about the people that might be hearing impaired, or how do you kind of tackle those? And so there's a lot of chatter out there about cities needing to address some of those issues. And so we're proposing that we budget to address that. And because she has more staff, there was a need to increase the educational development aspect of her budget so that her new staff can also have access to training opportunities and the IT charges that everybody gets or has. On the one-time side, as always, there's a portion of the health premiums that are one-time, and there's also a one-time program associated with educational development. This is for certification. And so we had our previous employees within the communications department had certain certifications that are needed to, for instance, use a drone. And so some of our new staff don't have that certification. And so we want to make sure that our new staff has all the certifications they need to utilize the drone and a couple of other elements. And that's why they're as one time, because they would just be just for the one time to get that certification, and that's it. Any questions on the communications and public affairs? Yes, sir.
Last year, there were 25 special revenue fund funds. In our book that we got, there's only 3. Are we going to get those? Because I noticed if you look back when you were talking about the general fund, special revenue's down $371,000. And I'm curious about PEG money in particular.
You're curious about what? I didn't hear the last
PEG
part.
money. Public
Okay.
education, government
Yeah.
money. But I would like to see all the special are there less funds this year than?
Go for it.
Those funds were not included in this document. They'll
Version?
be included in your August
Okay.
4th, all of them.
Okay.
Even the COVID-19, the new grant and everything else. In the future, we'll make sure they're in there. The reason I didn't put them first time, it's just, I was worried about the main ones and try to get this thing on time, but we're working it forward and those will be in the next year. But for definitely on August the 4th, those all special revenues will be in there.
Another thing, I really like the format where it shows how many employees are in each department, but can we get a summary page for the whole city?
Again, on August 4th, you're going to have all that in one page in the category of personnel in the back.
The other question is about COVID.
In August. I'm just kidding.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
When we look at these numbers, and we're gonna get to police and fire, they'll have like overtime, which could be covered by COVID. Are the numbers that we look at, are they the actual numbers and we will get reimbursed for some of that money from COVID down the road?
So, go for it.
Okay. What's going to happen is that all the expenses are allocated in each fund right now because that's where their expenses are. You're referring to if we ever get reimbursed from the COVID, how that money is be transferred back to the general fund. It'll be shown as a transfer in revenue. And what technically was happening, I will show my revenue increases by that 6, 7, or whatever the number is, but I'm still have my expense. But when you come to the bottom line fund balance, it's going to give me a little boost technically because it's going to wipe out my expense. So I want to have that hickey. So right now, when you see a fund balance in general fund, you can expect that to increase because I'm going to get that reimbursed.
How much do you think we're gonna get reimbursed?
We're working on it right now.
TBD,
But
What?
to be determined. There's so many variables, right? I mean, keep in mind this grant program runs through the end of December. And so to be determined, what the next couple of weeks look like, what the next few months looks like. And so there's a lot of unknown variables associated there.
And it keeps
on that.
changing every week.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
does. I have a question, though.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
it has to do with personnel. Out of the 638 people that you have on the total full-time employees, do you have any vacancies? Are those all full positions that are filled?
We do have vacancies.
That's included in that number? Because you're budgeting for the vacancies too, right? Okay.
Yes and no.
For 2020 budget, we budget full capacity,
Right?
even though there's some vacancies in there right now.
I know.
Does that
Okay.
answer that question?
Yes, yes,
Police, for example,
yes.
we got 13, 14, I believe. So, but next year, I cannot assume I'm take out 13, but keep in mind, we always budget at 98% of the payroll for PD because we also have that huge vacancy. I don't budget 100%.
Okay.
Okay. So if there aren't any more questions, I'll just wrap up this piece by just talking briefly about what the future looks like for some of these administrative departments that we just went over. We already talked about the planning efforts. One thing to be conscious of is a legislative session that's coming up next year. And so that's obviously something that, as the administration of the city, through legal, city manager's office, through partnership with TML, et cetera, we'll keep a close eye on that because we don't know if there will be any legislation that'll continue to impact our revenues, our expenditures, or just in general the way that we operate. Nobody really knows what that looks like, so it's important that's going on. Obviously, a big part of what we're already doing is just trying to figure out how to push forward with all of the different changes that we're making. And so that's a big priority in the future is obviously onboarding the grant administrator position, really fine tuning the setup around our new CFO structure. They'll talk tomorrow, I believe, about the budget software piece and some of the elements that they're working there. HR will talk about the update of the HRS system. And so there's a lot of IT projects associated down the pipeline that we'll hit on tomorrow during that piece. Oh, one of the things here that I forgot to mention too is that we need to monitor is just a lot of the work that's coming out of legal. We talked about, and Tiffany, will present today and talk about some of her goals associated with court of record and some of the other elements that she does, and there's definitely some evaluation that needs to be done on the folks that we have involved on the prosecution side and the level of time that is spent on that, as well as with everything else that we have going on. It's just something to look at and keep in mind that we need to keep a close eye on the legal structure, the structure of the legal department to ensure that they can support everything that we're pushing to do. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the police department. And we didn't do this intentionally by scheduling the interim chief to be the first one to go up. But that's just how it worked out.
Well, good evening, Mayor Pro Temp and members of council. It's kind of my pleasure to be up here in front of you and present our the department's budget. And when the schedule came out, I immediately responded to the city manager. I said, "Way to go, throw the new guy up there first," but that's all right. We're ready to go. Let's see here. All right. As you're aware, we're trying to tie our budget to the 2035 comp plan, and what's listed for the police department in a comp plan is really in line with our mission statement, which is to reduce crime and fear of crime through outstanding police work and in partnership with the community. And what we want to do as part of that is reduce violent crimes by 2% and property crimes by 3%. Some of you might remember what those are. Your violent crimes are murder, rape, or sexual assault, robbery, and aggravated assault, where your Class 1 property crimes would be more in line with burglary, theft, or theft of a motor vehicle. So when you see those, that's what we're talking about. And then in order to successfully address additional demands placed on the officers due to increased call volume, we sought recently the additional officers through the COP grants, and we were awarded to that. So you're going to see a slight increase to our personnel item as a result of that. And provided that we can hire these people in a timely manner, the officers will afford us the ability to introduce more efficient patrol and investigations protocols. And as you may or may not be aware, but recently we changed our crime prevention unit to the community engagement unit. The reason for this is because they've been doing a lot of public meetings and things of that nature, and as a result of that, you may have seen in the paper recently where we talked about developing a platform where we can engage the public more on a one-on-one. So that's part of some of our goals going forward. And we believe that by achieving these goals, we're confident that this will help us to improve the livability of Victoria. So when we look at our matrix, you can see these are typically or historically the 8 performance matrix that we look at. Unfortunately, we have little control over the number of crimes or crashes that occur, but we still believe that through an increase in our community engagement and education, we might help to curb some of these numbers. In addition, with the added personnel, we look to clear more cases, successfully prosecute violators, and as a result, our crime numbers may continue to fall. All right, so getting into the budget. As you can see, we have a total, I think you do realize that our budgets, it's police and 911 together, right? It's a combined budget. So when you're looking at our numbers, it's both for police and dispatch. But that totals little $15,574,333, which is a reduction of $300,000 from the year before. As you can see from this line item, our biggest increase is probably with personnel and benefits, or that line item makes up about 80%, nearly 80% of our entire budget. And as the city manager has talked over and over, you're going to see the the added healthcare contribution, as well as the increase. If you remember when we got the COPS deal, we had to pay a certain percentage of that. So that's in that increase as well. So we can break down some of the variances. I've already explained the personnel item. There's a slight reduction in supplies, and that's largely due to cheaper fuel. There is an increase in maintenance of $70,000 increase, which is largely from a software maintenance, and we really don't have a whole lot of control over that. And I don't know what that went up 3%, I guess. The annual maintenance fee that we pay for our RMS system, that went up. And we do have a one-time expense for our firing range, and that's basically, some of the branches and things like that are creeping in on us and damaging our fencing, which leaves livestock get onto the range. And I can speak from personal experience. You don't like to be in a prone position with a cow patty right next to you. So I think we need to address that issue. Under contractual services, you see a one-time purchase of $63,000, and we'll get into that in a little bit in the next slide. But I do want to point out the $12,000 in cell phone expense. That's because of Senate Bill 944, which, to break it down, basically, if a officer uses his or her personal cell phone in the performance of their duty, now that's subject to court discovery, right? So to avoid any kind of problems, we're proposing a cheaper option, which would be if we buy 20 cell phones and install them in the patrol cars, that would be cheaper than actually buying 80 cell phones and issuing each officer their own phone. So that's what the $12,000 is, and that's a way that we can save some money going forward. And then, of course, that increase of the interdepartmental for the IT charges, as the city managers previously spoke about. Okay, and one-time expenditures. We have an increase, or we have one-time expenditures totaling $350,888, which is a significant decrease from the year before. We've already discussed personnel, supplies, and maintenance, so that brings us to other charges and capital. And in the previous slide, we talked about the $62,000. You may remember a couple years ago, we began a process of converting all of our crime data from the 70s that was stored on microfilm over to digital. So that's hundreds and thousands of images that have been scanned in. This is the final, I guess, the final part of doing that. We'll be able to complete that process with that money. And not only does that improve our storage capacity, but it largely helps us to be more efficient as far as pulling the data back up. As for our capital outlay, although we see a significant decrease, we still have a few projects that we want to do in-house. One being some things that we want to do to our police department, in addition to some computer and software equipment, and that totals about $139,000. Typically through this time of the year, we want to talk to you about any kind of fees that we want to implement. We do have a VIN inspection fee that we're proposing, and we can get into more of it probably in September. But I can touch on it right now. You're all familiar with our auto theft task force that works within the police department. Their name recently changed to the, what's the acronym now? MVCPA, opposed to ABTPA like it was before. But basically what that is that we have 2 officers that are assigned to the task force. And they're the ones that investigate, vehicle theft, trailer theft, large machinery, recovery and things of that nature. And as part of their duties, they perform VIN inspections to trailers for like the 7 region area. And we've done this for years, but typically we've never charged anybody for that. Well, we recently found out through the transportation code that we can charge up to $40 for that. And that money then can be used, it goes back into the general budget, but it can only be used towards the cash match for whether it's personnel for the motor vehicle theft task force or equipment. So that's one of the reasons that we're proposing. And like I said, we can come back in September and share with you more in detail, but we wanted to bring it up in front of you now. So this brings me to the final things that I need to make you aware of. In 2012, we purchased our records management system through OSSI, or SunGard at the time. OSSI was recently purchased or taken over really by a company by the name of Central Square Technologies. Shortly after the takeover, we were notified that they are no longer going to offer or support our records management software, which means we're going to have to begin the process, and we've already started, but I don't know what it is. Is it 2 to 3 more years? I think it's we have 2 to 3 years left to actually replace it. And because that's such a huge dollar amount to replace it, we wanted to bring it up in front of you for things going forward. And not to mention the fact that recently we did, as you're well aware, we conducted our spatial needs assessment. So we just thank you for your continued support in helping us look at that along with some of the other capital projects that we have going forward.
Chief,
With that, I will answer or try to answer as many questions as you may have.
I don't have a question. I just want to make a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I guess I have to speak loud because of the Zoom thing. No, I just want to thank you and the entire department for everyday professional work and for selflessly putting yourself in harm's way to protect all of our citizens. I thank you for that.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm sure that I can say it for myself, but the entire department, we appreciate your support.
I was going to mention the exact same thing in regards to keeping it as a safe and livable city. So thank all your law enforcement officers and everybody that's involved with the force. So appreciate
you.
it. I did have a question though.
Yes, sir.
I won't let you off the hook that easy. Have we found, we may be looking for a solution to problems that's not there, but in regards to the firing range, are there alternatives looking at different locations for the department?
There have been some different locations that they have looked at, and there's some other things that are going on right now. Is the city manager still here? I think that he's aware of some things that we're looking at. I think they have identified 2 locations.
Okay.
But it's just figuring out which is the best way to go.
Just
and the
finding out
cheapest
how
way.
we can meet your needs as well. I know that's been a topic that's come up a couple
Yes,
of
sir.
times, and
It has.
seeing as that it was a maintenance issue, and I don't necessarily want you sitting there with a cow patty while you're kneeling down either. so,
We appreciate that.
yeah, absolutely.
It's dry.
Yes, sir.
Outdoors wet.
Question about response times.
Yes.
It's not listed in your,
Yeah,
It is,
it
you're
is.
right. I didn't make it part of my response, on the presentation, but there are actually 7 goals that we listed in the deal.
has
That's
it
one.
decreased our response time, or
I'm sorry, sir.
what is our average response time now? Is it less than it was?
Our response time has been, our goals in the past have been maybe 6 minutes or less or something like that. We are increasing some more calls for service, so we've given ourselves 7 minutes or less. And that's what we are, hopefully, if we come in underneath that, then that'll be good.
Chief, I was just going to ask, are we going to go back to having the zone meetings anytime soon, or is that going to be something in the future?
Well, we've done that, as you mentioned, historically in the past. We wanted to do it again this year, but COVID kind of threw a wrench in the mix. So we have plans to do that again, but we've also are in the early stages, and I don't really want to release a whole lot of detail of what we're talking about. But we are trying to have a structured deal, because that was open to the public, and we'd have a whole bunch of officers that would show up, and then whoever in the public in that area that wanted to come would come. And you've been to some of those meetings, and we didn't really get the response, that we wanted to get. So the thought is if we have a more structured deal where possibly some citizens that want to be outspoken or want to speak on behalf of other people, maybe they would come and address us, kind of a more controlled forum where they could share some things. And like I said, it's early stages, but that's kind of what we're working on. But we also still plan on having the zone meetings, because they are beneficial.
Yes, I think they were too. And I want to thank you for your presence out in the community, because the more that we see you out there, the more that, people are aware that, hey, we're being protected. And we thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. All right. Thank you all. Oh, I said y'all. Sorry.
Oh, man.
You missed it.
I did it, so now everybody can just
Yeah.
do it. So next up is fire department.
Good evening, Council, Mayor Pro Tem. We are very happy to present our proposed fiscal year 21 budget. We'll jump right in and start with our goals, I think. Maybe I have to do this right-handed. I shouldn't be left-handed. Yes, sir. As Chief Jameson said, and the city manager, we always have an eye on that Comprehensive Plan 2035, and our goals are no different. We're always looking at that, and when we get to the end of the presentation, you'll really kind of see where our focus of the 2035 plan comes into play. But for fiscal year 21, our goals are to develop a business continuity program to prepare businesses for disaster, and that just helps them recover quicker. So that's just kind of part of our community education and outreach program. Establish emergency response task force that can respond anywhere in the region within 2 hours. That most benefits Victoria and Victoria County, but we're just putting that piece together. Reduce the number of code 3 responses. That's a big trend in emergency services, is not going lights and sirens everywhere. That just improves the safety for all our responders as well as the public. As always, provide high quality emergency services, emergency care. Maintain a functional fleet and capital equipment. Replace identified apparatus and medical equipment, and obtain certification for members to replace members that have retired or resigned recently. And those are special certifications like technical rescue, hazmat technician, so on and so forth. And those last three are really where you'll see those goals have an impact on this budget. The others we can accomplish without much budget impact, but the last three truly have an impact on our organization. As Mr. Lofgren mentioned, response times, one of our key metrics, and I'll say it, I'm a self-proclaimed data geek, so I love collecting data and looking at performance metrics. So we do a lot. We dive way down into the weeds, but these are kind of our big picture performance metrics that we look at that kind of drive our decisions. And that's really what we want to be, is a performance management organization who makes decisions based on data, not just collect data. And response times is a good one. And what that tells us is, do we have enough fire stations? Are they in the right place? So on and so forth. Turnout time, are we reacting quick enough to that call for service? Are we getting out to that call for service? And a new one, or one you may not be familiar with, is unit availability. And this goes to the point of efficiency. So what we want to do is we don't want a fire truck or an ambulance to be 99% available. That means they're just sitting around not doing anything, right? But we also don't want them being below 75%, because that means they're too busy and they're not being able to cover their district efficiently. So this unit availability is a very useful tool for us to determine how efficient we are at performing our services. And we just used this starting in 2018. We recognized we had a unit that wasn't utilized very much, and it allowed us to relocate some resources and personnel to be more efficient. So unit availability has been a key metric for us that we probably never even thought of that we'd use. And lastly, something we've been really paying attention to recently is member retention rate. We'd love to be at 99, 95%, but we're sitting at about 87% for this year. And that's a big deal to us, because it takes a lot of energy and effort to train and recruit new members. So that's something we're really paying attention to and focusing on, so we can keep that retention rate at 90% or better.
Chief, with that unit availability, does it change based upon timing of year, like summer months, and you got brush fires and stuff out in the county? And do you then change the dynamics based upon?
Yes, we can reposition apparatuses to different locations based on the years of service, and that's why we try to look at it monthly, or look at it very closely to determine, where is the need most appropriate. And you're right, it's going to get busy on those brush trucks and fire trucks out in the county as if we don't get any rain. Hopefully we'll get some this week and save us all. Fiscal year 21 proposed budget, big snapshot. The key to take from this slide is, comparing 20 to 21's budget. And, we're right at $1 million. That's, almost $500,000 more than police departments under their budget. So I just want to point that out. just kidding. They have a added staff. We didn't add staff. So, but anyway, that's the big picture there is, we're right around $1 million less than we were in fiscal year 20. And we'll get into the details of why that is here in these next couple slides. With the budget variances, as city manager mentioned, we had a slight variance in our personnel and benefits costs. We had some long-term employees retire this year. So that's, you go from the top of the pay scale to the bottom of the pay scale. So that helps out at our personnel and benefits cost. We still had the one-time cost, as everybody's mentioned, with the insurance. On supplies, our biggest increase there, almost more than that, is our medical supply account. We've seen over the years, our vending machines has been able to has allowed us to keep that budget line item flat. But these past 2 years have really costs have skyrocketed in our medical supplies cost. And we're having to really increase that line item to stay up with the cost of medical supplies. And our provider, our supplier, told us, hey, get ready for another 10 to 15% increase in medical supplies. It's just the way of the world, unfortunately. And our call volume's up. So we're approaching 12,000 calls for service. And, we're just using more and more supply. So that is our biggest chunk, literally $40,000 in our medical supply account there. We also saw an increase in our PPE. Once again, the providers of our personal protective equipment, the firefighters' bunker gear, another 10 to 15% increase in cost of bunker gear. And we have to buy to stay in compliance about 30 sets every year. So that's just a cost. Maintenance, once again, we have some one-time projects for station maintenance that we need to take care of next year. We've also seen some increases in software cost. We added some new pieces in this fiscal year that you have to pay for the maintenance as you move forward. And so that's where that 18,000 plus comes from on the maintenance side. Contractual services. As the note says, this current fiscal year, we paid the ISO consultant to come in, and that was a big chunk, and that was just a one-time cost. The reason why you don't see a $50,000 variance is we have another one-time cost in this proposed budget of immunizations for our members. And when it's just a one-time where we have to get everybody caught up on these various immunizations so we can stay in compliance with health codes and regulations and things of that nature. Other charges, that variance is purely due to our training budget, and we added an additional person into our paramedic reimbursement program, as well as a peace officer certification program, which we offset with some other things, and that that was about an $8,000 package, but we were able to make some adjustments in other areas just to make it only go up $6,600. Interdepartmental, as everyone says, increase in IT and fleet maintenance charges there. Once again, our apparatus and equipment, cost, and those costs are increasing. And here's where that $1 million is. I'll let the cat out of the bag. But in this current fiscal year, we had a fire station project that Gilbert and I are working hard to get done, but we don't have it in this next upcoming fiscal year of 21. And also the radio program. We finished off our last payment this fiscal year of our radio conversion. So that's where you see the big variance and why we had $1 million savings there. Did I move? One-time expenditures, healthcare premiums. In our supplies account is training to, as I mentioned earlier, to replace those technical rescue or special certifications. That is a one-time training here provided by Texas Department of Emergency Management, or TEACS. We talked about the station maintenance projects. Those are one-time maintenance projects that we'll need to accomplish. And then you see the immunizations for 19,000 plus. And lastly, in interdepartmental, that's where our ambulance purchase, our new ambulance is being purchased, or actually it's a remount of an ambulance for 193,000. And lastly, capital outlay. Those are various capital projects, everything from capital medical supplies like cardiac monitors, things like that, to a new drone that we need to purchase because our current one is out of service. Our fee structure, happy to report that, me and Gilbert have been crossing our fingers since we made those adjustments to our EMS fees back in October. And right now we got the first report back, and it looks like our fees are going to generate anywhere from $150,000 to $200,000 additional in revenue from increasing those EMS fees. So that's great news. But the one thing that we're going to change in next fiscal year, or a couple things, is we're going to increase the inspector investigator on-site standby fee for fireworks events, and these are private events. And we've only had a handful of these over the years, but we wanted to match that up with some other fees and services that were already on the books. Something that's came up this last year that's unique and we wanted to capture is we've had a handful of calls this year for jurisdictions outside of Victoria County that wanted us to come in and provide investigations for 'em or inspections. We could bill them because we had an inspection fee on the books as a fee for service, but we didn't have any way to compensate for that travel charge and or do a fire investigation. That was something new that we haven't done outside the area. So our fire marshal built these fees in the event, like for example, there's a hospital in Palacios that calls us to come over and do their annual inspection of their hospital. Well, we want to be able to charge for that service. So that's what these fees are about. Cuero called us to come investigate an arson case because the state fire marshal couldn't come down and do it in a timely manner. So we went over there and helped them with that. So that's what these fees capture and changes capture is being able to do that and be able to charge for that. And lastly, fiscal year 2021, 2022 and beyond. As I mentioned earlier, we have an eye on our comp plan 2035. And really what the comp plan 2035 says, continue to provide great service and maintain that ISO 2 classification. And what we need to do there to maintain that ISO 2 classification, as you see are those last 3 projects, Fire Station 5 relocation, which, you're looking anywhere from $4.5 to $5 million. Adding a 7th station, to land to purchase it, and then to build that before 2030, anywhere from $500,000 just for the land. And then, drill for expansions. Dr. Young had a great question for Chief Jameson. It was like, hey, where are you going to put that shooting range? Well, we're hoping to secretly talk to him into going into a joint venture and building this public safety, training field. So we're going to try to jump on their coattails with that. But anyway, that's one of our goals is to expand our training and drill field in the future. The Fire Station 1 hardening project, that's the one I was talking about. Gilbert and I are working very hard to try to pull off with some additional revenue and different funds that are coming in. So we're still working on that. In the next couple years, we're going to have to replace all of our self-contained breathing apparatus. That's a huge expense. And all these projects, we are applying for grants for and have. So every one of those projects, we're trying to find some kind of grant or some kind of source of revenue to offset some of those costs. And that's all I got. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about Fire Station number 7, which
Yes,
would
ma'am.
be which would be a new station, and you just said that it was by 2030. I guess it's really more of a comment. If we have more infill within the areas that are already developed, I assume we have the capacity to be able to address the needs, and so it would be a savings to us if we could encourage infill.
Correct. Infill is already covered by existing fire stations. So, I'm going to use Station 4 as an example because you got Stockbauer and the Loop. A lot of open land there. Station 4 already encompasses that. So you wouldn't, just because there's a new subdivision that goes in outside of the Loop, down from Salem, doesn't mean we'd have to build a new fire station necessarily there. Fire Station 7 is in reference to an area of the city that isn't quite developed yet or developed out to the need of another fire station. And that's if things go as projected and that develops out and so on and so forth, more hydrants, more structures, more commercial businesses go up, then that's what truly will trigger the need for the fire station.
And thank you too, and all of your staff, all of your employees. You run into things that I would be running away from. So
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate that. We appreciate that.
So is Fire Station 5 going to affect the ISO rating?
That's part of the ISO consideration is relocating that to create better response times.
And Chief, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but location of what a Fire Station 7 would be is truly based on development.
Correct.
Because there's many different scenarios, and so even for example, on the topic of infill, we know that, we have Station 1 that of course is the most central fire station, but if we were successful in, for example, with infill, if we're successful with getting things moving at the intersection of future I-69 and 185, that's more southeast side, there's a potential for the 7th to be on the southeast side. Or if things grow, for example, more towards the airport, then there's a potential of the 7th being in that direction. And so it's just going to depend.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I have a question about the ISO rating.
Yes, sir.
What do we have to do to lower it even further?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear
What
you.
do we have to do to lower the IS rating?
Let's get to a 1, which is
Yes.
perfect, the best.
Yes.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. This is where
supposed
he's going to talk about how he needs a bunch of more personnel.
Yeah, and that's truly all it is the seventh station, possibly an 8th. I'm talking in 2030. And then additional personnel. That's what it boils down to.
You need the additional personnel for the additional fire station.
Right.
Right.
In addition to that. So, yeah.
I had some other questions.
Yes, sir.
Your counts, your calls.
Oh, call volume, yes, sir?
Yeah. Is your call volume up or down? It's not on the metric.
Yes, our call volume stays consistent around 11,000. We're approaching 12,000. I'm hesitant to say we're going to hit that because COVID has shifted it a little bit. We've seen a unique downturn, I guess, in call volume a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. It's kind of flattened, if you will.
What percentage of those are EMS compared to fire?
Our total call volume is 70-something% is EMS, probably approaching 80%.
What percentage of our call volume is in the city and what is in the county?
80% is in the city.
And what is the response time average in the county and compared to the city?
I don't think we.
The reason I ask that is because sometimes when we approach the county about how much we're asking for or whatever, or we come to an agreement upon, I think it'd be good to realize that it isn't just count calls, it's how much time you spend.
Right.
Because
Oh, yeah,
you've got
most
to
definitely.
drive all the way out, and it's a longer time, and
Most
that
definitely.
equipment is taken out of service.
Most definitely.
And I think that's a figure that we need to have, so when we have negotiations.
Yeah.
And Chief and his team have done a good job of gathering a lot of that information. And so we can prepare to have that discussion during one of our meetings if you like, just to at minimum show you what work has already gone into that. Because I'm pretty sure there's more work that has gone into that than council has seen. I mean, that's probably fair, right?
Yeah, that's very fair.
Yeah.
And I can tell you just off the top of my head, our average response time, just like Chief Jamison said, we look at that 5-minute mark, and we fluctuate anywhere from, 4 minutes and 45 seconds, depending on what district you're in, to 5 minutes and 15 seconds. So we hover right around that 5-minute mark. And in the county, it is a good average of 12 to 13 minutes response time.
Well, when you say 5 minutes, is that just for the city?
5 minutes is just for the city, yes, sir. And in the county, it's an average of about, I would say, 13 minutes.
The other question I have is usually the state gives us ambulance money. Yeah. And usually it's been used on fire trucks in the past. And I think you were gonna use it on the fire station. You were
Yep.
saving it up. Where are you with that saved up money?
Great
And-
question. Great question. So, so yes, we were. Me and Gilbert had these big plans to use that money on Fire Station 1.
Right.
And the program shifted the way it did its allocation. We were receiving in the first 2 years $500,000 to $600,000. It tanked below $200,000 the next year, and it caught us off guard. Actually, there was a lawsuit filed against us, which really drove the disbursement of that money way down. So it really caught us off guard as to what we were going to, it cut it in half or more than half. So we had to rethink and replan, and that's what pushed the Station 1 project back. This year, we're expecting, Gilbert.
We have 300 in the projection, but my gut feeling is going to be slightly under that.
Yeah.
Because we just submitted the report last month.
March, yeah, was it?
And our conversation with the consultants, everything might be a little around 290, 280.
Okay.
And they're changing it again.
Right.
so
It's only going to
they're-
go further down.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So, I don't know if you remember, we talked about a charity care policy that we had to
Right.
implement. So beginning October 1 of 2019, through that next cycle of 2020, they're looking at charity care. And that, we don't know what that is. That's brand new to everybody, and we don't know what that number is going to look like. So yes, it has dramatically fallen off. But that's what we're trying to take care of the fire station with. So we don't have to add that on top of the general fund, or adding that revenue in there.
I just wanted to flesh out a little bit more, you know, if we're working on metrics of the length of time in the county, looking at it from the other side, a structure that's just outside the city limits is in that 5 minute. And so it becomes a more complicated question of how far out did you go and how many times, what percentage. And I'm not necessarily asking you to do that, but if you're going to have that presentation, those questions will probably come up too.
And, you know, why we don't focus on response time in the county is because our contract is not based on a response time expectation. Many places that have a contractual obligation with the emergency response agency have a response time obligation, or that's part of the contract. For example, a lot of EMS agencies, you know, they have a contract with the county, and it's like, okay, we want your average or your 90% response time to be 8 minutes. Well, they have to meet that to get paid. Well, we don't have that, because if we did that, Victoria County is so vast, we'd have fire stations all over the place.
Right.
So we really don't use a response time metric for our county contract negotiations, if that makes sense.
That makes sense with us being rural and not having
Right.
a lot of roads that go
Right.
everywhere.
And, you know, I can tell you exactly why our response time is average is 13 minutes. Our predominant call volume in the county is to Bloomington. That's just the higher, most concentrated population in the county. And it's a 12-minute response time, 12 to 13-minute response time. That's why our average is that.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Thank you.
Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think next up on the schedule, we have municipal court. Yeah, if you want. That mask is messing you up, Derek.
Good evening.
Hi, Tiffany.
Good evening.
So the goals and
Yeah, look alive.
the goals for municipal court for this next fiscal year is to provide access to justice. We've experienced this a lot lately with COVID hitting. We had to launch a remote court sessions, and so continuing to provide that access to justice will continue through the next fiscal year as well. Timeliness of our case processing, striving for equality, fairness, and integrity in our operations, ensuring independence and accountability of the court, and then fostering public trust and confidence in the judicial system. So some of our performance metrics, this does reflect a decrease in caseload due to mostly COVID. My projections for this year are slightly lower due to that. Over the last few years, though, we have continued to see a slight decline in overall case filings. Case filings do come from a variety of departments, including police department, fire department, animal control, are some of our main sources of caseload. Cases disposed, warrants issued and cleared, and then our number of court sessions. We are staying on track with our court sessions, mainly due to the fact that we're continuing to provide services through remote sessions. We launched that in March and have continued to provide those through all of COVID, and so I don't see that declining. We've actually been able to continue through those caseloads, and so that will continue through the rest of this year. For the fiscal year budget for 2021, there is an overall increase of around $15,735, primarily due to the personnel and benefits, $5,000 of that being the healthcare premium. So overall here, another increase we have is supplies. We also started using text messaging notifications in the last few months, and so that's incorporated in this, as well as a judge's robe. Overall increase in our software maintenance. We have a 3% increase in that, and then also we are looking into getting a warrant interface. And that will allow us to basically submit our warrants electronically with the police department. And right now it is electronic on our end, but they have to manually enter them in. So our goal would be for that to be more of an electronic process. Contractual services, I believe City Manager mentioned this earlier about our prosecutor. Part of this is we did have a decrease because of our bank merchant fees. We switched credit card processors, and we had a $9,000 decrease there. But there is an increase in our prosecutor's contract of $6,000. We do have a part-time prosecutor that we contract out through legal department essentially. And we have seen over the years an increase in his overall services that are provided for the court. Our cases do tend to take more time, especially with some of the legislative changes we've had. And so that's why we see that increase. And especially with us looking into becoming a court of record, we want to incorporate some of those additional times that administrative cases will take. And so that's why there is a decrease, but there's also a slight increase in there that caused that to be just $2,700. Educational is another increase of our staff. We provide education not just for court personnel, but the judge, prosecutor, and bailiff. And there's also the legislative year coming up, and we're incorporating that expenditure. We do go to a yearly or every other year training for that. Now, we're probably one of the only departments that don't see an increase in our IT charges because we do have a special revenue fund, technology fund that covers that. So that is not reflected in my interdepartmental changes. And then an overall decrease in our capital outlay, mainly due to we already recently got all of our computers replaced. And the only other thing we have getting replaced is a scanner or a big printer in our office. And so these are the one-time expenditures, the premium increase on the healthcare of $5,600, the judge's robe, and then the RICO copier that we have in our office is $4,000. And then this is what our goals are going forward. Continuing education for court and support staff is important as we continue to educate our staff and continue to stay up to date. I do anticipate lots of changes in this next fiscal year as well, and so that will be important to continue that. Transitioning to a court of record is in our immediate goals. Developing a juvenile case manager program, I have previously mentioned that to you all when we changed some of the fees around at the beginning of this year. And so that's something we're looking to determine how we would like to develop that program. And that's with existing staff, not so much additional staff coming in, but a program within our office. We already handle juvenile cases, and so that is part of one of our goals. Increasing our court security measures, and then I know that there's a facility project that's being looked at doing, and I would like the courtroom as part of that. We share this same building with you all, and sometimes those conflicts occur, and so that's something we strive for in the future. And so with that, does anybody have any questions for me?
I just want to briefly add too that we are also assessing adding an associate judge. I think it's important that we be conscious of succession planning and that we also be conscious of the reality that might come as we try and transition to a court of record and there possibly being more demand for time for a judge, that it might be prudent to just have a conversation about what that looks like. Obviously, that type of position is appointed by council. I think at some point we had it, but I'm
Not
not.
since I've been here, but we had it budgeted at one point, and then
Yeah.
it didn't
Well,
make it.
long story short, it's just something to keep in the back of your mind that it's something that in the future we'd like to also have a conversation about.
Would that be full-time or part-time also?
Part-time. Right now they're part-time.
It would just be a second.
Correct. The backup
As an
or
associate.
somebody to split time with, things of that sort. It's not uncommon for cities to have, two, so that we're not scrambling, should something happen with her. And so, just business continuity of business mindset to it. Some cities, though, do have judges that are full-time staff, but that's completely different and sounds very expensive.
I have a question about revenues, the municipal court revenues. What are they? Are they up? Going to be up, down?
So I included in my general fund overview a decrease of about $160-something thousand in municipal court revenues.
Okay.
And for the most part, that's associated with the shift with COVID.
It was around a little over $800,000 is what the projection is right now for this fiscal year, and we usually are around 1.1, and that's total collections, if I'm not, is it, that includes our special revenues too in that? Just the general fund revenue? And so that was the number he had shown earlier, but they are trending down. We had, we averaged typically 500 to 600 cases, and April, for example, we had less than 200 filed cases. And so that had a direct impact with our total case filing and overall collections.
Tiffany, how have the remote court sessions gone? Have
They're
they been
going
popular?
very well. They've been very successful. We had, we did an open one today, for example. We had almost 40 people on. And
166.
the biggest thing has been educating the public on how to use the service. We've been using Zoom. And so at first it was chaotic, but we've definitely streamlined that process and educated them on how to use the application, how to log in, and communicating that with staff. And so the judge today was, you know, we were having one and she commented about how efficient it is. We've been able to provide services to people all across the country. We had somebody on that lived in Pennsylvania, for example, wasn't local, but she had a case that had been filed with us, and she was able to resolve it that way. And so it's been nice having that feature. We already had, prior to COVID, we had budgeted for it for next year already. And then COVID happened, so I was a little bit prepared to launch it, if you will. And so I have seen it be a successful platform for people, and we are going to continue that into the next fiscal year.
Excellent, thank you.
Do you have everybody sitting on like they're all sitting in the audience here? Do you have everybody together, or is it case by case?
So for the remote hearings?
Yes.
No, it's just the judge here in the courtroom. I usually stay in my office and I process the cases from there. And then we don't have anybody in the audience.
But no, I mean, if you've got 5 cases set, do you have the people for all 5 cases on that Zoom, or are they sort of in that waiting room or something like that?
It is open, so everybody that's on the courtroom, like we had the whole Zoom screen full of people today. You can see
Okay.
everybody can see and hear everything. They just don't have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. We have full control over that to help with the background noise. But we also have a YouTube channel that we have recently set up, but we can stream it on YouTube if we needed to. But right now, the way we have everything posted on our website, anybody can come on and observe the court sessions that we have going on.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Good job, good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I think next is Julie? Yeah, there she is.
Good evening, Julie Fulgham, here to present the Development Services 2021 budget. Oh, okay. So these are our goals and objectives for this upcoming year. We're going to continue to implement new ArcGIS tools that Esri has published for us. We're also going to upgrade our InterGov permitting software to the new enterprise version. This is actually very exciting for us. We have not exactly been happy with InterGov since we signed the contract with them about 6 years ago. The Silverlight plugin is going away in, I think, December of this year, and so InterGov published this update because they were basically forced to, and so we actually started that update on Thursday, and that's for our main permitting software. But with this update comes a brand new Citizens Access Portal, which is our online permitting system. And because of our ongoing documented issues with InterGov, they have actually just granted us 48 hours of configuration and project management time, as well as 2 registrations for admin training for the new Citizen Access Portal site, which is a total value of $10,000. So we're very excited with this new enterprise version and their commitment to helping us get completely upgraded and pushing as much as we can to our online permitting. So hopefully I can't say that our upgrade's going very well right now. We have not been able to access our inspections module since Thursday when we started the upgrade, but they keep promising me that things are gonna get a lot better, and they did commit to giving us those 48 hours plus the training, which again is a $10,000 value. So
Aren't you glad Councilman Bachnight isn't here?
Yes. But I will say that, that 10,000 value is because of our continued.
That's why she's going today.
That credit that they're giving us is because of our continued talks with them of expressing our issues and our problems, and it's their goal or their I guess last ditch effort to try and make us happy because they do acknowledge that they've been part of the problem. It's more their problem than our problem. So we are very excited about that project for this next year. We also will be purchasing new ICC code books and drafting an ordinance. Rick keeps tormenting me that this might be his last ordinance update. As you know, we're usually on a 6-year cycle. We are going to also update code enforcement officer zones and division of duties. I'm not sure if council's aware that we have an opening in code enforcement. And then we also will have 2 officers out on personal leave for extended periods this summer. So for the month of July, we may actually only have 2 officers covering the entire city. So we're hurting a little bit there temporarily, but with that, we're going to, with the new officer coming on board, we're going to separate the division of duties out a little bit and have our senior officers focus on maybe some more property maintenance, municipal court code cases, those things that just kind of get pushed to the side because they're very time intensive and they're harder to process. They're not like our environmental cases where we can clear it out in 21 days and abate it, and then have our code enforcement officer 1s and 2s focus just on the environmental. So it may be a complete disaster. I don't know. We're going to implement that on October 1st and have, like I said, those division and try and focus more on those harder cases, municipal court cases and the property maintenance. But we may be abandoning that after a couple months depending on how that goes. We also are going to embark on a thoroughfare master plan update, which actually is in this year's budget. We just published the RFQ, or we'll be publishing it this week. We also will be performing a traffic count study in the fall. That's actually through MPO funds and was supposed to happen this spring, but was canceled due to COVID because schools were out, and we don't ever want to do a traffic count study when the schools are out. We're also going to be implementing the new roof rehab program that we presented during the CDBG program budget, and then doing a UDO consultant selection kickoff, which is publishing the RFQ and moving forward with that project, and then ongoing Plan 2035 implementation. Not very good with this clicker. Okay. So we have 5 divisions in development services. We're not a very large department, moderate size, but we have a lot of umbrellas. So these are performance measures for 4 of those. The 5th one would be the development services admin budget, which is basically myself and a part of our administrative assistant's salary. And then, of course, we have the CDBG and MPO budgets. So for our inspections performance measures, we'll see a downward trend on overall permits with things leveling out, not having as much Harvey work being done. We're returning to more normal levels with the exception of new single-family residential. We still see a high number of new homes because of the general land office homes. But I do expect that those numbers to lower next year. For our planning and GIS, as well as code enforcement divisions, all of those numbers are staying pretty flat. Although we turned these numbers in March, and I did not know that we would only have 2 officers for almost an entire month in March, and so our actuals for 2020 may come in much lower than that. Also, you'll see that we had a very low number of actuals on GIS projects, and that's because of the amount of map updates that were required because of Harvey. All of our signals were damaged, so we had to go input new information, and so that took a lot of time on some of those layers. So that's why our 2019 numbers were so low for GIS. So this is our 2021 proposed budget. As you see, it's a little over $2 million, and is down about $287,000. So what those variants look like is our personnel and benefits is down. As you know, our development engineer resigned to go work for the county, so that was a very long tenured employee. Our supplies are up for half of that is the cost of our ICC code books, and then adding a little bit for additional advertisement funds for public meetings and meeting supplies. Maintenance is a little bit up for Intergov. That is due to our inspection apps. When we purchased the Intergov software, we were sold Windows-based apps that they never delivered. And based off some feedback from our development permit technicians that inspections weren't getting closed out, we finally just said, forget it, we're not going to wait for them to develop and deliver those apps anymore. We're going to go with the already developed Apple app, and so we bought the inspector's software and installed the Apple app for the inspections module, and so that resulted in an increase in our Intergov maintenance fees. Contractual services is down a lot, and as Jesus has already mentioned, that is primarily related to our transit being funded with the Victoria Sales Tax Development Corporation funds. So that's a yearly contract of about $209,000. And then last year we had some one-time money going to the floodplain study for the Meadow subdivision and then the Thoroughfare Master Plan. Other charges is a small increase for educational expenses for new hires, like ICC permitting, ICC certification test. And then we are having a big hit on the interdepartmental IT increases. And then our capital outlay is down because of a reduction in the number of computers that need to be replaced across all of our divisions. Our one-time expenditures are those health premium increases for $22,000. We are proposing 2 fee structure changes. As you remember, House Bill 852 required us to change how we charge residential building permit fees. We are no longer allowed to go off valuation, so we switched to the square footage, and we continue to see that those prices are coming in high. So we are again recommending reducing that by 10 cents to 10 cents a square foot. And then we're recommending that the base fee for commercial building permit fees go up by $20 in all the different categories, just because of the complexity that commercial jobs give us. So looking beyond next fiscal year, we are in the middle of a census, and so that will affect our CDBG entitlement grant. We're not sure how. To be an entitlement city, you have to be at least a minimum of 50,000. So the census may add a lot more cities to that pie, which may affect our allocation. So we're really unsure what that will look like. Then again, building standards, staffing and code enforcement inspections. I think we saw with a hurricane that the buildings and structures within the city that didn't have as much maintenance and were in poor condition, of course, suffered a lot higher. And so we do have a property maintenance code. We are behind on demolitions. And so we're going to try and implement some programs that focus more on building standards, but that, of course, takes staff. And then any sort of new programs, special initiatives, we're not really staffed for that. We're more staffed for the development side of operations. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question and a comment. Is somewhere in that budget, is there money for the planning commissioners to go to the Texas APA conference? And are people willing to? I know we have 4 new planning commissioners, and that's a great way for them to get trained.
Yes, so we have less willing to go than in the past. It seems like it's been a downward trend. We usually can convince 1 or 2 members to attend, and that is in the planning services division of our budget and their educational development line item. And so, yes, we continue to budget that. There hasn't been a big change. This next conference will be a digital conference, so we hopefully will get more people willing to.
That's what I was wondering, if you could even schedule meetings for the planning commissioners and have them attend together, something along those lines.
Right. Hopefully we'll get more people willing to participate, since they'll be able to participate from their own home this next year.
And then a comment, I guess it wasn't here, I saw it in the budget. but that in the inspections department, it mentioned that there was one developmental specialist in the inspections that earned the permit of technician certification. And the comments were that there are only 3,000 people that have earned that certification in the 21 years that that certification has been available. And so I have no idea who that is, but congratulations, that's wonderful.
That's Dora Gomez, and we'll have to recognize her at a future city council meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. Next up, I believe we have Dana with the library.
Good evening, council. It hasn't been very long since I made my annual presentation, so some of the information in here will be a little bit of a review on statistics, etc. Starting out with goals and objectives for fiscal year 2020 and 2021. We're hoping to be able to migrate to a new library software system. And I'm going to be coming forward, hopefully at a future council meeting, with more details on that migration and cost related and savings related to that. We are going to continue to develop and improve our virtual programs. And that has been a big push since the COVID-19 pandemic. Expand access to technology in our community to support remote meeting, remote work, and job searching options. Another goal that has really been pushed by the COVID-19. And then build library programs and services to support the downtown master plan. So here are a few of our performance metrics that I included, and I think we're going to see a lot of volatility here. We just reopened the building on June 1st, and we do have people coming into the building, people using the services. It's just very different. Maybe, we're not back to, and I don't think we will be for months, back to the level we were pre-COVID-19. So it's been very interesting to watch kind of what is happening. So these were some estimates that I made on what's going to be happening with how many materials are checked out, how many card holders we will be hopefully having in fiscal year 2020, program attendance, Wi-Fi, and annual library visits. We're going to see probably a big jump in program attendance because of our virtual programs, which have really taken off, and they continue to be very popular, and we're adding to those. So that's exciting. I think where we're going to see some decreases are definitely in library visits to the physical building, and some of that volatility in library materials checked out. As I said in my presentation about a month ago, e-materials available through our website have gone up. Physical material checkouts have gone down. And Wi-Fi, we haven't seen that jump, but we have made some changes to access to Wi-Fi, both further out from our building, and as people are coming in and using our building, we're going to see some increases in Wi-Fi usage too. So proposed budget. Overall, we're going to see a decrease in total expenditures. And I'm going to get into some more detail about that, a decrease of $141,000. Also a decrease in total one-time expenditures of $192,000. Total recurring expenditures of $50,845. A lot of our budget variances, there's some increases and decreases happening within the same line. But of course, we have the usual increase in personnel and benefits due to health premium increase, a small increase in general supplies, a decrease in some of our maintenance costs. Also, you're going to see a decrease in our annual fees for our library software. So I'm very excited to share that with you in a future meeting. But some increases in one-time software costs due to that migration from one system to another. In contractual services, we are going to see a decrease in internet charges, and that's another exciting thing that I wanted to talk a little bit more about briefly. Due to an E-rate reimbursement program, which is a federal program that we have applied to and are going to be benefiting from this next year, and some increase in our lease book plans. Small increase in training costs for our new library system software, and increases in purchasing fleet and IT. And a decrease in capital because we've finished our reflooring project and are not going to have a major capital project like that this next year. So for one-time expenditures, we have about $11,000 in health premium increase, about $2,500 in furniture, book carts, $35,000 in library system software migration. And we also want to start a circulating hotspot program, which will allow us to actually check out hotspots to people in the community so that they can have that internet access at home. Other charges, as I mentioned before, $1,000 for training for our new library system software. And then we have a small capital project, $3,600 for some shelving. As I said, there's two major areas when we look at our fiscal year 2020 budget where I think that we're really creating some efficiencies. One of that is migrating to a new software. It's going to provide us with a lower annual cost. And the second thing is applying for the federal E-rate reimbursement program for our internet services. So looking beyond fiscal year 2021 and beyond, some of our goals include review and update of the library strategic plan. We're coming towards the end in 2022 of our current 5-year plan. Develop a plan to extend library services through mobile services or branches. Redesign of the Main Street side of the library to connect with the street and pedestrian traffic. And continued improvements to technology offerings, programs, and digital materials. So that is it for the library budget. Any questions I can answer? Yes.
There's been talk in the years of hardening the library or after the last hurricane, all the windows. Is that something that's now in your budget or is that going to be in building or?
Yeah, we have a couple of things actually happening. I think that Derek, if he wants to speak about at least one particular project.
Sure. So we do have a grant from the Community Development Block Grant Program that will provide shutters on 83 windows and a panel system on 22 additional windows. We had put that project out to RFP and then needed to revise some of the scope of work. So we're in that process of getting that all approved through the state again. So.
Okay, and is that cost included here or is it paid through the grant or?
It's through the grant and I believe it's in the current fiscal year, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be a special revenue fund that's not in there right now.
Right.
Wow, well, I'm sorry I stole your thunder a little soon. I didn't have any idea.
It's all good.
Yes, we're very excited about that because that's
Yes.
really going to be a time saver and it's going to make us feel a lot safer in that building.
My other question, but I guess it's a comment, in 21 and 22 and beyond, to redesign the Main Street side of the library to connect with the street and pedestrian traffic. I just wrote a great big yay in my notes. I think that's great. I vaguely think the library used to have a door there.
Yes, it
And,
did.
You know, coming from downtown, it's a great idea, so thank you.
I have a question. Actually,
Yes.
two questions. On your performance metrics, you have library materials checked out. Is that just physical library materials checked out?
That's a combination.
And how much is E and how much is physical? Just a
We have been running close to almost about I would say a quarter of that is e-materials and 3/4 of that is
Up
physical.
dramatically since, has it gone up dramatically since?
It's gone up slightly. It's
Slightly?
slightly increased over the years, over about the 5 years that we've had the e-products available for our library. We've seen that increase slightly and that slight decrease or volatility in the physical materials.
The other question, you may have said it, but you said your capital outlay went down, but you're still spending $250,000. What's that for?
Let's see.
What?
Capital outlay?
Can you repeat that?
Under proposed budget, capital outlay is $250,000. It is a lot less than last year because of the reflooring project. But what is the $250,000? What is that capital outlay going towards?
Oh, yeah, go for it. Go for it.
We got about 198,000 in books. That's a normal purchase of books annually. I believe he has an AC replacement too in there. That's your 200, majority of it. He has some computers, I believe, that's been replaced.
Yes, yes, we do. Yes, we do have some computer replacements, and we have, well, we actually have, as part of the E-rate program, we're also getting some replacements of some older computer equipment, but that's reimbursed at 80%, so we're only paying 20% of that total cost. And so about $8,000 of that, I think, is some of that.
You did a tour of the library. You talked about the computer area and how you were going to manage it with COVID.
Yes.
How is that going?
It's actually going pretty well. We don't have, at this point, you know, a lot of people asking, oh, why is this computer not available? We have a lot of our computers blocked. We have signage on them that's temporarily unavailable. We've spaced apart the seating on the computers so that we at least have 6 feet, if not more. So it's working pretty well so far. But a lot of people are using their personal devices in the library as well. So I see a lot of people bringing in the laptops and using their phones. Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask, because that would make a difference.
Can you tell me about the circulating hotspot program that you mentioned?
Yes. Basically, we would purchase the hotspots, the hardware, and then we would also have kind of an agreement with the company for that internet access. Is that correct? I'm looking at James' foot here for just some backup. Then you can check those out to people that can check those out for like a period of time. So if we decide to do that for a couple weeks, a month, we haven't just talked about that in detail yet, then they can use those at their home if they need internet access at home. If you remember when VISD was moving into the home, the at-home schooling, that was a big hurdle for a large part of our community, was getting that internet access. And it took so much time for them to actually get the equipment in. Of course, there was that delay because everybody wanted it. So that really shows to me a need in our community to have that internet access so they can use it for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever we decide from home. And then they would return that back.
Yeah, and maybe you can speak better to this, but at least in my experience, for what it's worth, it's not uncommon to have libraries issue these types of equipment out to the public.
So we're providing internet service in someone's house.
Temporarily.
Right.
We're going to start paying for Suddenlink for people?
I mean, yeah, no.
It's a slippery slope. I raised the question.
Sure. Mm-hmm. No, it's a valid one, and as Dana mentioned, when the school district was going down this path, or quite frankly, even when we shut down the library, it really impacted a lot of folks' ability to do what they need done, whether it's apply for jobs or even apply for unemployment or whatever the case may be. The whole role of libraries has evolved quite a bit. Libraries nowadays are almost a place where people can do workforce type of environments, right? Like they seek resume writing tips, they seek a computer to apply for a job. They do all sorts of things for school, you name it. And so that's why libraries have tried to fill these voids, especially since there are members of the community that, quite frankly, just can't afford it. I don't know if in other libraries that offer the program, if they have, certain requirements, for proof of income or whatever, that might kind of help at least ensure that people that really need it are the ones that benefit from
Well, and
it.
if we were filling out job applications, I can see that, but I can also see people taking advantage of it and watching Netflix and chilling.
Yeah, true.
And I don't know if that's necessarily the taxpayers.
And James, I don't know if there's a way to, I guess, limit,
And I certainly understand
what gets
VISD's,
accessed.
stance of this with remote learning and what they're going through. That's a
Right.
totally different thing.
Right.
I think VISD versus city. It's just I saw that and wanted a little bit more information.
Sure.
In regards to that.
Yeah, and we can kind of, regroup more specifics on it and kind of fine tune the details behind the program, and then come back and share the more detailed, I guess, plan for it.
Okay.
Certainly.
And then that might help, answer questions, or just at minimum provide more information for council to consider that.
Thank you.
Or is there?
I will say that Derek is taking the lead on looking at internet broadband issues around our community as a whole. One of the elements that this pandemic also showed us was the need for reliable internet, right? And that's where, the Suddenlink comes in. But even though, yes, there are some customer service issues with Suddenlink, it's still quote unquote accessible. It just may not be reliable. And so there's the issue of, is it accessible? And then there's the issue of reliability. And so in some cases it's accessible but not reliable, but in some cases it's not accessible at all. And so we need to really actually take a look at that. There are some grant opportunities through the EDA and others that might help us address some of these issues. As a matter of fact, even with the CARES grant program that we talked about potentially getting reimbursed, you can utilize, or you can expend funds in those areas and get those reimbursed. But Derek's spearheading on that. I don't know if you want to hit on it. But we can do it as part of, next time, more specifics.
Sure.
But the whole concept of accessibility of reliable internet, we're trying to take more of a direct role in. It was in the work plan, the VSTDC as well, because it's also becoming an economic development item. There's a lot of literature out there that is suggesting that now companies, one of the questions they're going to ask when looking for a community to move a business or set up a business, they're asking the question about the availability of internet for their employees, because they want to know that if a pandemic hits and they have to send everybody home, will their employees have access to reliable internet? And so before, we had always looked at internet as solely an educational item, which the VISD just experienced. But now it's becoming more of an economic development thing. And so every community is going to be trying to address this gap. So anyway, I'm rambling.
Well,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna pony on, or whatever it is, piggyback onto that. Is that possibly something that we could issue at a charge? Because, some people may not have computers. A lot of people have smartphones. Smartphones have their own personal hotspots. And so Dr. Young is correct that we'd be asking taxpayers to pay for something that a lot of these individuals may have access to in other ways or don't realize, or could we just look at a charge for it to make it more equitable?
Yeah.
I could look into that and see what other libraries are doing as well, and see if there
Yeah.
are libraries that are charging for that fees.
We'll bring back a more specific program for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dana. Next up and last for tonight is Jason with Parks.
Good evening, council. Try to make this short, right? Okay. I brought an entourage with me too to help me out since I am fairly new. So if you see the whole Parks and Rec department back here, that's why. So our 2021 goals, obviously to provide a high quality park system, just to maintain adequate safety and for the community, preventable maintenance and capital improvement plan. Obviously, we want to grow the recreation division by implementing some new athletic and community programs. That was thanks to the soccer fields the last go around. That's going to help with that initiative as well. Implement athletic events designed to attract visitors to the city for multiple day events. That's again part of the soccer field complex. We hope to be able to push that this bullet point as well. Pursue additional revenue sources that focus on providing capital funds for projects. A lot of the grant opportunities, I believe, that we're going to be looking at in the near future, and that's what this bullet point addresses, especially TPWD, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, has a plethora of grants out there for us. So we're going to be looking at that pretty heavily. Continue to the development of Riverside Park Golf Course to enhance playability and support optimal turf conditions. The next slide I'll show you has some statistics on that, and I think the golf course is doing really well in that aspect. And then maintain competitive fee structure and annual pass membership levels while continuing to grow tournaments and events at the course. Again, that's something that that staff has been looking at and been doing a really good job with. So some of the performance metrics that we have up here for you are the adult softball leagues. You can see in fiscal year 19, we had 27. We estimated 26, and next year we're looking at a projected 38. The youth sports leagues, fiscal year 19, we had 2 of them. We're estimating 4 for this year, and then a projected 8 for next year. Our recreational programs, that's something that I know staff has been working on pretty heavily. So fiscal year 19, we had 19 recreational programs. Estimate this year for 16. Of course, COVID happened, and that's probably going to change the game a little. And then fiscal year 21, we're projecting to have roughly 20 of them. These next 3 bullet points are all related to the golf course. So the annual pass memberships for fiscal year 19 was at 186. Currently, we're estimating 200. And then again for 21, 200. Our total rounds are at 20, or last fiscal year 19, I'm sorry, 25,421. We're estimating 26,500 this year, and then for next fiscal year, 27,500. So again, continuing to grow the game.
That's even with the shutdown.
Yes, sir. And then tournament rounds, we're looking at 1,194 or 49. I'm sorry, last year, 1,300 estimated for this year, and then we're projecting 1,500. So again, hopefully with COVID, hopefully taking a downturn this next fiscal year, we'll be able to continue to expand the golf course rounds and the tournament play that we have out there. So Parks and Recreation, we have three or four different budgets for you. Obviously, Parks and Recreation being one of them. Another one that we'll touch on is Community Center, and then as well as the golf course. So to roll right into the Parks and Recreation budget, we are looking at, let's see, sorry, I've got to get used to this one too. So 2021, we're looking at a slight increase in personnel and benefits, and next slide we'll talk about why. Supplies, we're looking at a slight increase as well, from 306 to 314. Our maintenance, we're looking at a slight increase in that as well. Contractual service, we're actually going to come down on. Our other charges that we have, we're looking at a slight increase to that from 25,600 to 28,000. Interdepartmental, we're looking at a slight decrease in that one, 153 to 134,000. And then, of course, our capital outlay has been reduced. So we're looking at dropping down to 308,585. So our total expenditures for this year is a little less than what we had last year. So last year we're at 299,000 or 2.99 million, and this fiscal year we're looking at 2.993 million. And some of those items that were kind of fluctuated, if you will, positive or negative. These are the details for them. So the personnel and benefits was an increase of 56,000, mainly due to the health premium. Our supplies had gone up slightly, 7,815 is what we're looking at, mainly for some of the recreation programs. Fertilizer and herbicide increased due to proactive turf maintenance schedule, which on the flip side will actually help us out. So if we're having a proactive turf maintenance schedule, it's obviously going to cut down on the weeds and hopefully we'll have better turf and so less mowing. Our maintenance is a slight increase of 4,685. Basically it's some work order software and UV probe services to professional services. That's going to be for the splash pads. making sure that we have all of that controlled appropriately, the UV. Contractual services are going to go down. This is at $35,610 decrease. This is going to be in a reduction in the Lone Tree Business Park maintenance and movement of one-time monies to recurring.
Why is that? Why is there a reduction in the Lone Tree Business Park maintenance?
That's a good question. Danielle? That one I don't know right off the top.
I'm just hoping the answer isn't that we're going to mow it less often or
So
something.
the Lone Tree Business Park maintenance actually got moved over into the Community Appearance Department when Daryl took that over. So it was part of the right of way.
So it's not necessarily a change in service, just a budgetary issue.
Correct.
Thank
Just
you.
movement of money.
Thank you, ma'am. Apologize for that. So the other charges that we're looking at is a slight increase to the Taft Sports Management School for the recreation coordinator. It's to help, again, try to draw in some more of our sports and recreation tourism. Interdepartmental is going to be down 19,533. No vehicles that we plan on purchasing. And then, no transfers. And capital outlay will show a negative 23,000 or 23,000 less. So our one-time expenditures that we have, again, personnel is 27,000 for the health premiums. Nothing in the other charges, and then capital outlay we have set at 308,585. That's going to be for 3 HVACs over at the Parks Admin Office and the sports complex maintenance building. Also have in there a kayak floating dock to help with a lot of that the kayaking and paddling that's going on down at the river. And then the Riverside Pavilion barbecue grill, and then just some various mowing pieces of equipment. So with that, we roll into the golf course. We have, again, just a slight increase from personnel and benefits. Our supplies, we had a slight increase. Same thing with maintenance and the cost of goods. We have gone up just slightly. Contractual services pretty much stayed the same. We've gone up just a little bit in there as well, and some of the other charges. But if you go down to the very bottom, our total expenses have increased slightly from $953,466 to just a little over $1 million. And some of those reasons are at the slide right here in front of you. So the personnel and benefits, again, just the increase in the health premiums. The supplies, kind of goes back to what I was mentioning in the park side. We're looking really at having a heavy turf maintenance program. And so we're looking at an increase of $35,240 for chemicals. Again, if we're really proactive with the turf management that we have, the less on the back end that staff has to deal with. So looking at, putting out more controlled growth regulators, so that way the grass doesn't get so high. Really just looking at chemical control for our greens and fairways in general. So if we have a really strong turf management program, it's going to help us with our maintenance costs. So then our maintenance has gone up just slightly, $6,000, and that was for the upgrading the light fixtures over at the cart barn and increase the maintenance costs of cart and utility vehicle fleet, just an overall maintenance cost increase. The cost of goods, we're looking to increase at $1,400 roughly. It's just due to projected increase in sales. So the more that we sell, the more product that we have to continue to put out on the floor. The other increase is $2,600 to increase merchant service charges, just lights and power. And then $450 for professional memberships and subscriptions for our golf pro as well as our superintendent.
And I have a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
On your cost of goods sold, is that for the food or something that y'all are selling?
The cost of goods?
Yes.
It's going to be for merchandise.
Merchandise,
Yes, ma'am.
okay. And then on your contractual services, you have an increase in merchant service charges and everybody else had a decrease. Do we not use the same merchant service provider in throughout the city? Do we not use the same merchant provider for the services, for the credit card service?
Unfortunately not.
service.
Okay, because,
Go, sure. So with our point of sale operating system, they have certain merchant providers that integrate with their system. So part of the increase from this is actually the increase in sales. So the more golfers that are playing, more times they're running a credit card, the more charges that we're having, the more that we're paying those merchant fees. Between that and the membership fees, which have increased over the past year, it's just more sales, more money that they're collecting from credit card transactions.
So if you look at the revenue side, when you go through these with the detail of it, you'll see the revenue increases, which correspond to that increase. Same thing when you cost of goods sold, you have an increase here, your sales should go up too as well. It's that same correlation.
okay. No, I was just wondering because it said an increase in, but that makes sense because it depends on the sales, you're right.
And the merchant services depends on what company or software you're using. So that point of sale system that the golf course is using has a certain merchants, the software we use for utility billing has their own merchants, so that's why it's different.
It's different,
all over the
okay.
place. And because of that, it would also be very difficult to bring it all together, even if that's what we wanted to do.
Okay.
Right. Any other questions? No? Okay. Okay. So our fee structure that we have, I'll come back up. Fee structure that we have here, he doesn't need to go anywhere. He just needs to stay right here for the moment. For the Riverside Golf Course, I'll let Rolando speak to that.
So daily green fees, we're basically taking up each one of them $1 all the way from our junior rates all the way to our most expensive rate, which comes on the weekends. That $1 is just to help cover increasing and growing costs for all over maintenance for just general costs of goods. So that's helping us kind of cover some of those areas. Our practice course fee, which has actually been a pretty popular area of our golf course since we opened it last year. Again, the use on that part of the golf course has been great, but we want to make sure that it fits with the value for that part of the golf course as well to become a more valuable piece of the property to us. And we want to make sure that we show that through those fees, and we're generating additional revenue by the amount of plays that we're seeing on that part of the golf course.
And I think that's a good point because that's the key takeaway, right? Is that as the condition of the golf course improves, it's important that that value proposition is reflected on the rates. And so it's important to note that.
Thank you. Domestic beer, this is one of those kind of growing cost of good items. That 25 cents will help cover some of those costs that we've seen the increase over the past couple of years. That hasn't changed since we've opened at the beginning of 2018. So just, again, something to help cover the costs that we've already seen and that we've eaten over the past couple of years. Annual pass holders, this one is those last four kind of grouped together. So those are our four different type of memberships that we offer right now. The first two are memberships that include use of a golf cart, one of our golf carts in our fleet. So we'll be taking that part of the program up. Part of this is from us maxing our program at 200 members, so that's why you don't see the change when we looked at projections for next year. We are maxed at 200 members right now. That's a comfortable number for us, being that these guys have access to golf carts all the time. The shed portion of that, us reducing those fees, is trying to give us an opportunity to put more of our members into our cart shed. So we have about 100 cart sheds that we have the opportunity to rent alongside our membership, so people that can store and use their own personal golf carts out on the golf course. And we'd like to be able to push more people into those carts or more members into those carts and help with our cart fleet, the use of our cart fleet, and provide hopefully some additional space on our golf course for other guests of the community or people that are traveling. So the more members I can get in their own golf carts, they're using their own golf carts out on the golf course. I then have additional carts within our fleet to put more people out on the golf course. Therefore, trying to increase revenues, number of plays, just makes our tee sheet more active and trying to be as efficient as we can with it. So squeezing those two, or all of those membership types and squeezing the amount between the two of them will hopefully provide our members an opportunity to pick one or the other if they feel a personal golf cart, which I've had a few people move into with all the COVID, everything going on. I've had a few people move into their own personal golf carts into those sheds so they can use theirs they can sanitize and do all their things as they would like and be a little bit more comfortable with it. So that's the idea between squeezing those two. The program has been very popular. We have a waiting list of about 30 people right now. So we feel that the value of the program is there. So taking up on the other two, I think is very comfortable. And as we squeeze those other areas, if we can get additional people into cart sheds, that will hopefully open additional spots to our membership at the same time.
All right.
I won't walk off yet.
Thank you. All right, any questions on that? No? Okay. Okay, thank you, Rolando. So we'll roll right into the community center. This one's pretty straightforward. Our personnel and benefits, again, slight increase. Our supplies have stayed the same. Our maintenance has actually decreased slightly. Our contractual services decreased slightly. Our other charges have stayed the same. Interdepartmental has increased a little bit. Our transfers out have actually decreased, and our capital outlay has decreased as well. So the total expenditures last year were $815,464. This year we're looking at proposing $779,957. So a decrease overall. Some of the reasoning behind that is, of course, personnel and benefits is kind of sound like a broken record, but $17,000 for the health premiums. Maintenance, we saw a decrease of $4,400, basically mainly not due to not renewing a software program. Our contractual services are going to decrease by $13,000. That was a reduction in the mowing contract that we have. The interdepartmental transfer is $4,617, is mainly due to the IT charges. Transfers $2,000 less than last year, and it was due to not issuing HSAs for the new hires. And then the capital outlay, a negative or a reduction of $38,000 would be the one-time purchase of the HVAC chillers and handicap closure replacement. So our one-time expenditures are really just the $1,500 for the IT charges. And then what we're looking at as far as the department from 2021, 22 and beyond is obviously the Parks Master Plan. I think that's going to be the guiding piece for our department. Riverside Splash Pad, I heard that was a really interesting project. I'm looking forward to seeing that. The duck pond renovation, we definitely want to make sure that we get that taken care of and we utilize grants as much as possible for those. Enhanced turf schedule, it's something that I mentioned earlier about the back end piece of helping with maintenance. Expanded irrigation and efficiency, making sure that we have the right amount of water getting put down on the grass or the turf to make sure that we're utilizing that water source efficiently. And then a player development program that we're looking at doing. So that's all I have for you tonight. Do you have any additional questions for me that I could pass on to staff? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
You probably passed this one on. Page 16 of the big budget, which is page 96 of the budget. Anyway, I noticed there was a comment about a savings because you were postponing daily on grass replacement. And I was curious about more details on that and also whether it can sustain waiting or if we
Sure.
need to seed it with rye or what
So
it's all about.
Gotcha. I will pass the mic.
So the replacement of the turf for Deleon Plaza was actually scheduled for this fiscal year, but we did away with it because of COVID to try to save some money to recoup it on that end, along with, you know, the Riverside Stadium parking lot and some other projects that got cut this fiscal year. But that was actually slated for this fiscal year.
But basically, the grass is recovering on its own from lack
Well,
of use.
hopefully with his turf management program that he's going to be putting together, it'll take care of a lot of the little issues that we have with that turf out there.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So just better, more proactive fertilizing and herbiciding in that area. And just a little sneak peek for tomorrow. You know, as part of my Main Street budget, I wanted to upgrade the level of the standard of the turf and the whole downtown area. And so that kind of ties back into is, either Parks is taking care of it, or I also proposed a contractor to come in and take care of it that would do the same thing. It just wouldn't be such of a burden for Parks Department to do it. So just a sneak preview for tomorrow evening.
Thank you, Danielle.
I guess I've got a comment or question in regards to the increase in cost of beer out there from $3 to $3.25. Is that enough?
That's that's a question for Rolando.
He got up real quick.
For
I mean,
people watch.
I look at that and I see what the numbers were and raising it to 4 from 3 to 4 versus just a quarter. That's an extra $25,000 in revenue based upon beer sales for a year, and compound that over 4 years, we got $100,000.
Sure.
And knowing that we've had a tough time coming up and in expenses meeting revenues, trying to find a way to bump up
Sure.
some revenues.
I think the answer to that question is depending on what side of the counter you're sitting on. So
I have a feeling people out there playing golf and it's a hot day, they're going to buy beer at $4 versus $3.25.
they do. There's a lot more kickback to $4. Some kickback to the $3. The 25
$3.99.
Yeah, there you go. The 25 cents will cover the rise in cost with a few extra cents. It's basically to cover the increase that we've seen. It used to be, when we first started, beers were 81 cents a piece. They have now moved up to 96 cents to just over $1. So that will cover that cost with a little bit of room for some additional movement over the next year or two. And that's kind of the idea. I think $3 to $3.25 fits well with our community and our fee structure, our price structure for a lot of things. And I don't want to go outside of that. I think it's comfortable, again, for our community, the people that are playing golf. I don't want to go, again, we talked about value a while ago. I think it's a good value. It's fair. Again, I think it fits well with our community, with our golf course.
I just want to make sure that our revenue,
Sure. Oh, yeah.
revenues are matching.
Sure.
We
Sure.
start finding a deficit.
What you should have said was, sir, if you'd like to increase it, we'll happily increase that to $4.
You can always put a tip bottle out there. You can just put a Kansas tips. Just collect some
Well,
tips.
when that goes to paying for chemicals or goes to paying for salaries.
Yeah.
Sure. I think one of the things that we're still missing at this point, with the golf course being still in its infancy, is rounds are continuing to increase. So we are seeing additional rounds, additional sales. COVID slowed us down a little bit for this year, but I think we're having a very good year. I think there's a lot of potential for the golf course still, and I think we'll see that as we get a chance to put some of these reports and things ahead of you. But yeah, the idea behind the beer was to cover costs that we've already kind of eaten and then give us a little bit of a buffer moving forward. The price, do I think $4 is probably fair in most cases? Yes. For our community, I don't think it's I don't think it would fit well with the community to jump that far this fast. So we want to continue to increase and cover costs? Yes. We want to make some additional money? Yes. But I don't want to lose customers on that, because I can raise it up to $4, but if I sell fewer beers, end up with the same amount of revenue, then it doesn't help me either way. If I can move it up, I would sell less beers to make the same amount of money, but that's not the idea. I want people to still enjoy themselves. Again, I think the $3.25 fits
Responsibly.
Responsibly, correct. Yes. Yes, 6 feet apart and responsibly. Correct.
Thank you.
You bet.
Margin on a beer set, 36% of the cost of it sold. So we're making some money on it. But one thing, Rolando he's touched on it, but one of the objectives when we start this whole program is slowly, gradually going through the improvement of the whole caliber, quality of grass and everything. And one of the biggest things with next year's budget is a jump in that, because could we stay the same? Yes, but as a result of the caliber, quality of play, you're going to attract more people there. You have more bigger bang for your money on the play side than the beer side. The beer side is just a gravy on the steak. And that's what we're trying to capitalize. And you're right, this is not the first time we had this conversation. I was the one who wanted to go up higher. But it's like, you don't want to push off your customers yet, because this is our third year, folks.
Sure.
So, I didn't say y'all.
It's okay.
So, anyway, so we're gradually, in our business plan, we need to start moving to the point where we're fully mature, and then we start making back and doing. But it's like doing an excellent job on this side. So,
I just saw that and went, oh,
no, you're on the money, but it's like, do you put that out there, or you invest on the quality of the place first, where you can bring more, and then you can do what you need to do? That's where the big bucks are at.
thank you.
Mr. Alfaro, for the benefit of the people watching, how many days have you been on the job, and how much involvement did you have in the actual budgeting process with this great presentation?
I believe I'm on week 4, and I believe this PowerPoint was due the end of my first week or right at the start of my second. So I literally just cut and pasted and put the PowerPoint together for y'all.
Great job.
Any other questions? Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, so with that concludes the presentations we wanted to give tonight. And so we'll resume and pick back up tomorrow at 5 and hopefully knock out the rest of the departments. And that way we don't meet on Wednesday.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Okay.
You have to adjourn the meeting.
Now we adjourn the meeting.
I don't know, Gilbert. You're talking about putting gravy on steak?
Salad burger's gonna